Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody's present. Let's proceed. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council of the University of City, Texas. It happens to be Tuesday, August 16th, believe it or not, 2022. I'll call the meeting to order now at 6:31 p.m. and call for a quorum check, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Here.
Councilmember Buck.
Present.
Councilmember Goolsby.
Excuse. We'll discuss them in a moment. Excuse me.
Councilmember Najarian.
Here.
Councilmember Shelby.
Here.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Here.
Hey, quorum is present. We shall proceed this evening. This evening's invocation is scheduled to be by staff, and we have a very special gentleman who's going to do that this evening, Mr. Lanny Dagg, who will give us the invocation. And everybody, please stand. I'll lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Let's pray. Loving and generous God, you are the source of all that is good, the source of all our blessings. Thank you for the gift of life itself and for the freedoms we enjoy in this great country. I ask you to bless and protect our men and women in uniform, our first responders, and our city employees. Bless and guide our mayor, council members, and city staff. Grant them wisdom and a sense of justice and welfare. Lead us all to see the good and the truth in all points of view and to show grace, love, and respect for one another. Father, there is so much divisiveness in our land. We ask that you heal that divide, open us each to your will, and lead us to work together for the good of all. We pray this in your Son's holy name. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Well, thank you everyone for attending this evening. This is obviously a very special meeting because we have some quite critical items that we have to deal with this evening at our council meeting. So I'm glad that many of you are attending, because I'm sure there are items of interest that appeal to all of us. So we'll proceed now with the first item is to consider the absence of one of our council members. Councilmember Goolsby cannot make it this evening. He's got some personal matters to attend to, and sometimes they take more precedence over council meetings. So I do need a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Approval. Second. Okay. Councilmember Shelby, second. No problem now. Any discussion? All right. Call for the vote, please.
You said second by Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Yes.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Goolsby? Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
Aye.
That's a nice little aside to start this evening off. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's move on then to our next item is to consider tab number 8, to consider the minutes of the Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022 City Council regular meeting. There have been some fixes made on some of the terminology that Neville has done, and so if you did not discover any of those he did, that's what he does. He does it well. Move to approve. Motion made by Councilmember Najarian.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Buck. Any discussion? All right, call for the vote then, please, Chris.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Okay, let's move on to our next item this evening, which is our citizens to be heard. It's a time to provide citizens with they can address council on issues or concerns that they have. It needs to be informative. Obviously, of course, there will no council action taken on those items at the evening. We ask you to limit your discussion because we do have a lot of items on the agenda this evening. So I really appreciate though, and there are quite a few that signed up this evening. And let me call you up, and if you give us your name and address for the record, please, we'll proceed from there. Okay, the first person that signed up this evening is Ashton Bowman.
Ashton Bowman, 12807 El Dorado. I just wanted to share a PSA tonight. Nick and I started a charity this year called Santa Babies, helping local low-income kids, 3 and under, get presents for Christmas. Our church, Grace Community, will be hosting the event in December where we'll give the family the presents. I wanted to share our charity tonight in case anyone on City Council or their loved ones knew any low-income children here in Universal City. I have flyers that I'm happy to give out to anyone who would like one, or even if you want to take a handful. You can also donate through our Amazon wish list, and I'll add you to our donor page on our website if that's something you're interested in, but I'm mainly here to spread the word to help get in touch with as many local low-income kids as we can. Nicholas and I have already purchased about 400 gifts ready to go, and each kid gets about 4 to 5 gifts. We just really want to reach as many local kids 0 to 3 as we can. So I'll have flyers if anyone wants some, or you can chat with me after the meeting if you have questions too. Since I just wanted to present this tonight, my husband's going to help out with the city business after me. So thank you guys.
It's a wonderful, wonderful thing you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the individual that signed up after that is Mr. Nicholas Vaughan.
Howdy, I'm Nicholas Bowman, also at 12807 Eldorado. And I'm just here to talk about, just do a quick overview of the agenda, and then my suggestions for you guys, as the survey said. For agenda tab B, right?
Yep.
The $30 million bond proposal, I'm asking you guys for post voting on it, especially since City Councilmember Goldsby isn't here. City Councilmember Vaughan brought up a possible changing of venue tax to street and property maintenance, and that would give it a substantial amount. I feel like we have not explored every option on how to pay for streets that would impact the citizens the least amount. So delaying this vote gives us time to explore all our options, and we may not need the full $30 million bond as a bond to get the street maintenance done. So that's my first suggestion. My second agenda item would be, I would like to talk about is tab G, which is the tax rate. I'm hoping Citizen Council will vote for option 4 out of the 4 options. It is a win-win. It lets the citizens have a tax break, and the city gets exactly what they need for their budget. The NNR option gives the city extra money that they do not need according to the budget. However, the citizens do not get a reduction. So I'm asking the city to really look into option 4, which does give citizens a reduction.
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it, Nicholas, very much. Next individual signed up this evening is Mr. Bill Fitzpatrick.
Hi, good afternoon. Bill Fitzpatrick, 206 Quail Drive. I've amended my words. I was going to talk about the funding for the golf course from the citizens' tax that we pay. I don't see that on the agenda as being a serious item, so I'll save my words and my strong words for that. What I would like to do, though, however, is remind everyone that there is a casino night Saturday night. So I'm hoping that everyone will participate. And you can get those tickets at the city website. And someone you know very well, who I'm not handing one of these to, is going to be handling the Texas Hold'em tournament. And there's some really nifty prizes for those. It's going to be Saturday from 6 to 9 o'clock at the golf course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Okay. Next individual this evening is Mr. John Heberling.
Howdy, all. John Heberling, address is 8434 Ulysses. With respect to the bond, the proposed $30 million bond, I would ask that you might be a bit more specific on that. I believe specificity will lead to support because large numbers historically have not won approval without a lot of knowledge as to what it's going to be used for. With respect to the sales tax, please consider changing the venue tax to a street maintenance tax. I think it would be a better use of the money. With respect to the budget as a whole, I would also support option 4, which would result in a balanced budget. And with respect to the proposed tax rate increase, with property values and assessments having gone up by a substantial amount, many of us are confused as to why we would consider a tax rate increase, since having more property value to deal with is going to provide an increase anyway. So an explanation of the need for that would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. Okay. Next individual is Colonel Jim Vinci. Vinci.
Honorable Mayor and Councilman, thank you. Not adversarial in any way. I'm here for two reasons. Number one is to get an education. I know I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box, but this is very complicated. So I hope when you discuss it, remember that the sharpest pencil, not the sharpest pencil in the box, you keep it at a level maybe we can kind of understand kind of what's going on. It's just, to me, it's very complicated. I mean, I thought the codes were complicated, but this is complicated. And secondly, I want to thank Public Works and Randy and all of his people for all the great work they do on the roads that they're doing right now. I know it's limited number of budgets, but I just think he ought to be, as you well know, he and his folks ought to be commended for the work they do with the amount of money that they have to keep the road maintenance up. That's all I have, and thank you all very much for what you all did.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Okay, next individual this evening, and I'm going to ask you to pronounce your name because I just can't quite read it. Lois
Gukian.
Gukian? Oh, hi, Lois. I know her very well. I just couldn't read it.
I don't go by last names.
Our choir she's in our choir, Lady Perpetual Health Catholic Church.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lois Gukian. I live at 12205 Hollow Glen in Live Oak. But I'm here because I represent a group of people who use the Universal City Dog Park on a daily basis. We have three concerns that we wanted to bring before you. One of them is primary one is one of safety. On the small dog side of the park, for a long time, there has been a large hollow log that the dogs and the children climb through and climb on and everything else. But in the last year, it has begun to disintegrate. And chunks of that log are coming off, and we're concerned that someone is going to get hurt. So if you can find another log, that would be great. If you can find a large concrete pole, pipe or something that can be taken in its place, that would be great too. The second issue is the lack of places to sit down on the small dog side. At present, all we have are large boulders. We used to have a table and that was taken away because someone's dog got hurt. But we would really like to have a bench or two. And the third issue is something for the children to play on. Some little ramps or something that they can run up and down just to keep them active and happy. And that's all I wanted to present.
Thank you very much. If you've ever heard of the Master Singer, she's been singing with the Master Singers for many, many years, and she has a beautiful soprano voice. And she's recovering from some pretty serious surgery. She hasn't been able to join us in the choir for a while, but we're praying that she's going to come back really soon. So thank you for coming, Lois. I really appreciate it. Okay, next item, gentleman, Mr. Bernard Rubal. Mr. Rubal.
Mr. Mayor, council members, again, it's a pleasure to be here before you. The first item that I'd like to mention is, again, the bond issue that is coming before you. And that is, I believe you'll find it really is the consensus of the people who have been paying attention to this, who have tried to express themselves here at council and other places, that there's a need for a plan for the streets that are to be renovated. I sat with Randy for approximately an hour and a half, and I found that we've had deferred maintenance on streets pretty much since street survey in 2009. I think the residents would be comfortable if they knew ahead of time what streets were on the list and when they would get addressed. I do not believe that there will be a chance to pass a bond issue for streets alone at that magnitude, at the magnitude proposed, unless there is a clear demonstration by the city what will be done. And basically, most of us look at it as some member of some resident presented Sunday as a blind check with no real resolve in getting things done. Again, we're working off of a 2009 survey, which still has not been addressed. The reason that survey hasn't been addressed. So I think it's critical for council to understand that there's nothing to be really lost with postponing a bond election until you firmly establish what you're going to do with the money. And I think, as presented by others, the residents will support it. I did not bring a cup of coffee for each of the council members to ride down the streets of Rose Garden or Coronado or other places in the city, but I encourage you to do that before you, and understanding that we do need some prioritization for the citizens to get behind. The other thing has to deal with the proposed tax increases. I understand the city's in a difficult position with regard to dark economy and so forth. However, the government's always in a position these days with regard to funding limitations. And therefore, I suggest essentially going back on to the budget and become negative in the budget this year. Essentially estimate those expenses that are sort of superfluous. And I've pointed to council at least one superfluous budget item that historically has been put in there to pad the budget. So there are other items. I think that the venue to increase employee training is good within limits. The limits are that it should not be a venue for exclusionary practices of other people to be considered contingent hiring. So I consider what is being proposed as a topic generally called partialism, which is just a step under cronyism in employment practices. So thank you very much for your time, and good luck on your difficult considerations this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Next individual assigned this evening is Mr. Tom Maxwell.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to come up and talk tonight. Unfortunately, I've come with a very heavy heart. I'm going to utter some words here in a few minutes that I did not think I would ever utter in a city council meeting in the state of Texas, much less in University City. But I have in my possession a series of emails that was sent by one of the council members to the next door neighborhood, basically identifying all of his dissatisfaction with the issues tonight, the bond issues, the taxing, everything else, with instructions to disseminate the information to the citizens of Universal City, encouraging them to come tonight, and also encouraging them what words to use in order to discuss citizens to be heard, to vote down the policies. Now, the 12 years that I spent on city council, I do not recollect one time that we had any issues with finances across the board that was not fully issued. Also in these emails, is a lot of disparaging words about city staff and what their abilities. Nothing is actually said that they're not doing the job, but the indication is there. Personally, I think this is an individual's way of circumventing the process and procedures to get their own agendas highlighted. In other words, there's no integrity whatsoever in these actions. So, as far as the venue tax goes, I will state this. It's a good idea. However, the venue tax should continue, and that money should be placed to the event center and build an event center that will actually service Universal City and the residents of Universal City, because that is the opportunity for the golf course and the event center to be a profitable operation. in all situations, it's only a subsidy. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, as you know, my custom is, if anybody would like to address council that did not have a chance to sign up this evening, you're certainly welcome to come forward right now. Otherwise, we shall proceed. Anyone else want to address council? All right, let's proceed. We do have a very huge agenda this evening. And thank you, all of you, for your comments. We really appreciate them. So the first item we have this evening is tab under business, is tab B, which is consideration and approval of an order calling a bond election to be held by the City of Universal City. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Turner.
Mayor, thank you. I'm going to make a few comments, then I'm going to turn it over to Victor and Rose, and then after that, Randy's going to come up and speak for a few minutes. So in listening to some of the comments, I thought maybe I might want to clear up why we hold bond elections. And so I've heard several people say, you know, road maintenance. So we budget for road maintenance every year. When we do bonds, it's not necessarily fill a pothole, put down striping somewhere. That is road maintenance. What we're talking about is major road reconstruction, whether it be a total reconstruction with new drainage, new sidewalks, water, sewer lines that have to be done. That is a total reconstruction. That is not road maintenance. The other item that falls under road maintenance is mill and overlay, and I'll let Randy explain to everybody what that is. But that is a process where you basically remove all the top layers to get down to the base, and then you reconstruct the road from there. That is not road maintenance. That is road repair. Some people call it preventative maintenance. Yeah, it is, but it's very expensive, and it's not something that your average budget would carry for a road improvement program of that depth. So Mr. Rubal, and I appreciate the fact that he spends so much time with Randy on the 2009 traffic plan that we have for street and drainage improvements. And I remember when we conducted that plan, and it did include all of the streets in Universal City. It had a valuation of all of those streets, whether they needed to have total reconstruction or a mill and overlay, and what the estimated cost of it was going to be. The reason we did that in 2009 is because one hadn't been done in decades. And so what that did is it gave us an overview of really going out 50 or 60 years and the order in which the streets needed to be reconstructed, or significant improvements needed to be to them, or small things that we could work within our budget that would be due to maintain the life of those roads so that we could spend money on repairing and improving other roads. So when we went out in 2010 to the voters after we had that plan, we didn't tell them what streets we were going to do. We gave them an indication that street work never ends. And you know that because I know several of you in your call quite often, hey, I need asphalt thrown at the end of my alley, or I've got potholes, or I've got this. And we're like going, yes, we'll do what we can to maintain that area, but eventually it is on the list for reconstruction or for mill and overlay or whatever has to be done in order to prolong the life of that street. So when we went out in 2010, we went out for a $20 million bond. So it took us 12 years to issue all of that money. We didn't do it overnight. We did it in increments, which we always propose to do it in increments. Normally we wouldn't do it in $6 million increments like we're proposing this time. Is it $6 million or $5 million? $6 million. But we already know that the costs have escalated since we got the cost estimates in 2009. The costs have escalated since we looked at road projects in 2020 and 2021. So we are facing a different environment where road reconstruction and mill and overlay is a lot more expensive than it used to be. So the plan that we have doesn't change over time because roads don't get better on their own. They don't get healthier on their own. The substructure doesn't get better on its own. So the plan, even though it was done in 2009, it's still apropos for today. Streets get worse with wear. They get even worse when they don't have anyone using them. So whether it's mill and overlay or complete reconstruction isn't going to change. One of the reasons why we don't tell people which specific streets that we're going to do, and I know they all say they want specificity, and what they're really saying is, I want to know if my street's going to be done. Because if my street's not going to be done, I'm not going to vote. Well, it doesn't work that way. The streets are used by everybody, whether your house is on it or not. It's a public street. It's not your street, it's the public street, and anybody can use it. And so we have asked people, well, if your street is on there, are you gonna vote for this? No, but my street's on there, I don't want it. Well, we can't get into that situation. We're all in it together, whether it's your street or not your street. The street reconstruction and mill and overlay and maintenance and repair, it goes on ad nauseum. And I know some people think $30 million is a lot. Maybe for this city it is a lot. They're going to be the biggest bond election that we've had. However, we have a lot of streets, and we just can't keep letting it go by the wayside and, save up over 6 years and hope that we have enough money to do a road construction or reconstruction on one street, because the prices will be changed by the time we get there. So that's what I generally want to put out. I'm going to let Victor and Rose come up and do their magic, and then Randy can add any other comments that he wants. And then at that time, I'll take questions and comments from the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, Ms. Turner, thank you for having me here this evening. For the record, my name is Victor Quiroga with Specialized Public Finance, and we have the honor of representing the city as your financial advisors. We were invited here tonight and had previously were requested to look at the city's existing general obligation debt, debt that is voted in, debt that is utilized by what we call an interest and sinking fund tax rate, and property taxes are used to repay that debt. We're asked to, based off of a $30 million street program that would occur over time as your previous bond program did, how can we best fit it into your existing debt portfolio? And to primarily how to mitigate the tax impact on your taxpayers. And so we have a brief presentation here for you tonight just to highlight some of those items. And it is in front of you, and some of this we shared with you we shared with you a couple of months ago when the city was first discussing a potential November bond program for your street projects. And so the first page after the cover sheet, this is just a election history. In 2007, May 12th, 2007, we had 3 propositions on the ballot. Relatively smaller items as compared to the May 8th, 2010 bond election, which was for $19.5 million, which passed, and that, as you know and was previously discussed, was for your street program. And as you also know, we asked the voters for an amount not to exceed $19.5 million in 2010. And as you know, we did not issue all those bonds or go into debt for that full $19.5 million all at once. We did it in increments. And so we use that same formula to provide you an estimate as to what this proposed street bond program would look like. So the last bond election was May 2010. As we previously discussed a few months ago, if you go to the next slide, what are the affordability factors when you're looking at general obligation debt? Again, debt that you're asking the voters to let you issue on their behalf for the proposed projects, in this case streets. And so what are the main drivers as to how much you could afford and where will you have to set your tax rate on? So the biggest driver are going to be your property values. The second one is going to be your existing debt structure. We previously issued other bonds in the past. Those are coming off at different points in time. And so our model here was trying to work with that as best we could to try to fit in this proposed bond program, again with the goal of minimizing the tax impact on the taxpayers. And of course the third thing is your INS tax rate, or your interest and sinking fund tax rate, or your debt service tax rate. This tax rate, or one bucket, can only be used for the repayment of principal and interest on outstanding debt that you have. And so if you go to the next slide, this is the property value. This year, although many people, and I live in Bexar County too, saw our home appraisals go up, For the city as a whole, there was a very different dynamic that occurred here. Yes, individual property owners, most likely than not, their property values went up just like the rest of Bexar County. However, when you look at the city's taxing boundaries, your property value actually went down with what you could work with this upcoming year. And that is due to the over 65 homestead exemption being put into place. And so for this 1 year, we, if you compare it to last year, we had a 9% year-over-year decline. However, even with that decline, if you go back 10 years to 2013 and you average it out, we're averaging about a 5% annual property value growth rate per year going back to 2013, despite the 9% value. What's going to happen in the future, I don't know what's going to happen with the housing market and everything like that, and the economy. And so what we try to do is we try to be as conservative as possible, as you know, to try to give you the worst case scenario if you're trying to fit in this bond program and the voters allow you to issue this debt over time on their behalf. And so if you go to the next slide, this is your interest and sinking fund tax rate. Again, this is just the one tax rate component that you're allowed to use and can only use for the repayment of principal and interest on outstanding debt. And this is supported by property taxes. So again, going back to 2013, it's been relatively stable between 10 to 11.6 cents per $100 valuation. What you see here in 2022, just like I showed you in the previous slide, is that we did have a property value in total decrease this year. And so the interest and sinking fund tax rate, if you want to visualize it, the more property values that you have, the less your INS tax rate, or the lower the INS tax rate, you could bring it down. It has an inverse relationship. And so for the INS component, as being proposed later on in your meeting, it's looking like to cover the debt, the city is requesting a tax rate of going from 2.1 cents to 11.6 cents. Again, that is primarily because we have less property value to work with within our city. And so we're looking at potentially having an INS tax rate. Again, it's subject to your approval this evening, of 11.6 cents for your INS tax rate for this upcoming year. So now we go into the $30 million bond program. As financial advisors, we look at your existing debt. We try to provide an estimate as to how and when we could fit this in. How does that compare to your existing debt schedule and debt that you have on the books? And so if you're on slide number 6 with me, these are my bond model assumptions. I covered the previous items with you just to let you know and put this in perspective in regards to us still trying to be very as conservative as possible, because when we talk to voters and cities or school districts, when they talk to voters, they want to give them the worst case scenario. The last thing you want to do is tell them it's going to cost X, but all of a sudden it's going to cost a little bit higher than that. So I'm trying to be conservative in this model, and these are the highlights of the model. So over the last 10 years, we've been averaging 5% annual growth despite the 9% decline for this year. In my model, I'm assuming that the next 5 years that we're going to average 3%. Again, these are just estimates. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Thereafter, I'm assuming that annually we're going to grow about 2% per year in our property values within the city to work with. Again, the actual average for the last 10 years was 5%. So we're just below average here, still hopefully being conservative. We're also assuming that we conduct a November 8, 2022 bond election. In that election, and I'll let Rose talk about this in a little bit, what you're asking is that you're asking the voters to allow you to issue an amount not to exceed $30 million for a street program. If that is approved, it's up to this council and future councils as to when and how to issue that debt. Right now, just for example purposes and estimation purposes to see how can we realistically fit this in, we were told that to go ahead and assume that every 3 years, starting next year for this example, that the city will issue of that $30 million authorization that you have, $6 million every 3 years because, you know, if you issue $30 million, it's really impossible to spend all that in 1 year, and plus you're going to see a big jump in your INS tax rate, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So here, we are looking at $6 million installments in bonds every 3 years, starting in fiscal year 2023. If you issue the debt next fiscal year, the actual tax increase wouldn't occur until the following year. So from a year from now, if everything passes and the bond passes, at this point next year, in 2023, at that point you're going to see, okay, we issued, let's just say in this example, $6 million. Now we need to start planning on the repayment of that bond. How does it look like? What are our property values going to look like? So this is going to be not $30 million overnight. It's going to be over time, just like the 2010 bond program. So you can see here, we're issuing $6 million every 3 years. The last increment would be 2035. Again, just want to point out, these are just estimates. Future councils could decide, you know, well, we don't want to issue this, or we're going to reprioritize certain streets, or we want to move this up and accelerate the debt issuance faster. So again, all you're doing this evening is just putting it out to voters. You're not actually issuing this debt yet. You're just giving the voters the option to tell you whether they want $30 million and if they want the streets improved. That's all you're doing this evening. So if you go to the next page, again, just trying to provide highlights from our model that we built based off of the assumptions that I shared with you in the previous page. And so what were the results? As I said, assuming we issue $6 million every 3 years under this example, we could fit in the $30 million bond program. And keep in mind, if you approve the 11.6 cent INS tax rate for this upcoming year, that's what I'm basing it on. That's all I know right now because you've not acted on that yet. So I'm just using that as an example. Because again, if the voters approve it in November, the tax rate won't go up automatically. It's going to be the following fiscal year. So that's going to be my base year, this upcoming year that you're looking at. Your INS tax rate is going to be 11.6 cents per $100 valuation. So again, keep in mind, we have debt that's on the books. It's already coming off the books incrementally over time because we issued them over time. So I'm trying to fit in this new bond program as best as I can and mitigate that tax impact. So right now, our taxpayers, if you approve it for this upcoming year, the INS tax rate that they would pay for next year would be 11.6 cents. Based off of us selling these bonds incrementally until 2035 over time, we could incrementally increase that INS tax rate, and based on our model, the maximum INS tax rate would occur 13 years later in fiscal year 2036, and the difference between the tax rate we have now, 11.6 cents per $100 valuation, I'm sorry, 11.16 cents per $100 valuation, in 2036 would be potentially 12.34 cents per $100 valuation. Now, what I'm not saying is that a $30 million bond program is going to cost you 1 penny. I'm just trying to compare it year over the year. What are our taxpayers right now, or homeowners, what are they used to paying on the INS side? Right now it's 11.16 if you decide to approve today's budget proposal. And so again, I'm trying to work that into your existing debt right now, and I'm trying to decrease the tax impact and make it as affordable as possible if you decide to go this route and fund your streets using long-term bonds. The bonds that are structured here, we assume just like in previous bonds where we would issue the bond and we would repay it over a 20-year term. But again, these are just estimates, these are just models. Future councils could decide, well, you know, we don't want to do a 20-year bond, we want to do a 15-year bond. You know, you could decide that at a future date. These numbers that I'm sharing with you, they're just an estimate right now, the best that we could possibly give you. What I also can't tell you too is what are future councils going to do between now and fiscal year 2035 when we issue the last increment of the bonds, if they were approved. You know, future councils could decide, well, you know, we want to reduce the INS tax rate. Future councils could say we want to have other priorities. We want to have an election for, I don't know, a bad example was, you know, animal shelter, or maybe not bad example for some people, but a library, something like that. right now we don't know that, and future councils could decide to change that. So I'm not saying here that in 2036, our INS tax rate is going to be exactly 12.34 cents to support this. I'm just saying that based off what we know right now and these estimates, we believe that we could stabilize our INS tax rate, keep it around that 11 to 12 cent target between now and then, assuming no other bonds are issued, and support the $30 million student bond program. And so what does this look like? And again, I'm not saying that the average home value in 2036 is going to be $294,000 as it is right now, but I'm just trying to compare apples to apples because I don't know what values are going to be. I'm hopeful that, maybe we grow by more than 3% per year on our property values or by more than 2% per year on our property values, that we're closer to 5%. If that's the case, then we may not even have to increase the INS tax rate to support this bond program. But I just don't want to overpromise you that or anything like that. So again, I still think these are conservative. So assuming that we go from 11.16 cents per $100 valuation to 12.34 cents, that's a 1.18 cent increase from what we're used to paying right now. That average home value, the annual impact would be about $35. Monthly impact would be $2.90. These are going to be 20-year bonds. You are going to be borrowing, if it is approved over time, you would be borrowing that debt. You obviously have to pay back the principal, and you obviously have to pay back the interest as well. What I'm also conservative here on in my modeling is, I'm pretty conservative in all this, is that I'm assuming pretty conservative interest rates as well. So I'm being conservative in how quickly the property values grow, and also being conservative, and I'm estimating that interest rates are going to get higher. But there, my crystal ball is pretty foggy on interest rates as well, but I'm trying to be as conservative as possible. The last thing I want to highlight, at least financially, is as you know, you recently voted in the over 65 homestead exemption for your homeowners that qualify for that. If you proceed with the bond and it does require a rate increase in your INS side, and the levy has to go up for that, over 65 homesteads that have that exemption, either now or maybe in the future before you issued all the debt, they would not be impacted by those future bond issuances after they have that homestead exemption in place. I'm happy to answer any financial questions that you may have. Again, these are all estimates. These are just highlights of the model. There's one final page in this packet regarding the timeline based on Texas law. And actually, you know what? I probably talked too much, so let me hand it to Rose. And so,
let's get our presentations done before we open up.
Yes, I'm still here for questions.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Ms. Turner, and staff for allowing me to attend. My name is Rose Koneski. I'm with McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. We are public finance attorneys for the city, and my specialty is actually in election law. And I wanted to highlight for you, August 22nd is the deadline to order an election to be held on November the 8th. If you choose to do so by that deadline, the last day to register to vote in that election would be October the 10th. The first day for early voting is October the 24th. Early voting ends on November the 4th. And of course, the election day would be November the 8th. There are some other critical deadlines regarding posting and publishing notice of election that my office will work very closely with staff to make sure that we achieve those deadlines with a lot of extra time. I wanted to underscore two things. The first one is something that Victor mentioned. Texas law only requires voters to vote in a bond proposition for or against the issuance of, fill in the amount, fill in the purpose, and the assessment of the tax. In your case, the proposed bond proposition says the issuance of not to exceed $30 million in principal amount for street improvements and the levying of a tax. So that your bond proposition makes it clear to the voters that this is an amount up to. And as Victor said, it's a program that's phased over time, and it not only satisfies the financial goals of the city, but it gives the city discretion in addressing the projects as they come up. My second thing that I wanted to underscore was something that Ms. Turner said earlier about the specificity. Texas law does not require anything other than a general statement of the purpose. In this case, it's street improvements. There are really good reasons why you wouldn't be more specific. If you choose to place this measure on the ballot and it passes, and on December the 25th, a giant sinkhole appeared in front of this building, you would have to pivot. You need the flexibility in the year-to-year assessment of what needs to be addressed. And your ballot language will achieve that goal for you. As with Victor, I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Followed by Randy now.
Oh, I got lots to add. So a couple things I heard tonight, Council, is what are we using this money for, which you just heard from our attorney. But can you go to his first slide real quick? I just want everybody to understand, because I did hear it tonight. This bond is for street and drainage improvements. That's what will be on the ballot for consideration. The other thing, the way we go from here as far as presenting this to the voters, we don't go ahead and name the streets. That has never been done. The way we've done it in the past and the way we inform, because you as council do not want to promise somebody a street that's going to get done that we can't afford to do. Okay? So we're going to, once the voters approve, or they can disapprove, but once they approve the amount, we have to go, I can name you some streets, and I'll show you. These right here that are highlighted are the ones that we have completed. These are the poor and very low, very poor streets that we have in our city.
Poor condition.
Poor condition. Let me put my glasses on. But you'll see the ones that aren't highlighted on here. These are the ones that we still need to do. We have over $500 million worth of streets, and that's an old number. I don't know what the value is today. But there is pages that you'll see that we have done. It was over 5 million. 5 billion. It was over 5 million. Yeah, because right now we've done 20 and we're doing 30, so we're at 50. So you'll see here, I still have lots of this to do. So we got the streets. We know what streets that we need to do. And they're still the very poor and poor streets that we did from 2009 that we haven't done. Those are the ones that are on our list. Those are the ones we will evaluate. So when we get to that point to the voters and they say, yes, we support, because that's what we're trying to do. We need everybody as taxpayers to know that there are a need for streets. Some streets have already been done, and if you put it out there that we need to do more streets, well, they've done their street. We've done their street. How supportive will they be? And stuff like that. So we want them as a whole, as a community, to support this. So when we go to the voters, and I printed this out, I went back in history, and what we informed the voters, and I'll read verbatim that went out to them. How will the street bond project cost? And the design and construction will be $19.5 million. Why does the city consider these improvements? The last major street bond that was approved was over 20 years ago. And at the time, the current city streets were in major need of reconstruction and repair work, which could not support by our current revenue budget in a street without a street bond. The current market street improvements are favorable in the city with the interest rate, and the cost is low at the time. I'm talking about the last bond that we did in 2010. Since then, the city has been budgeting annually street improvements projects as funding become available. On the average of the current budget, which was $250,000 back when we did this, right now you've approved $400,000 for this year, which in return gets one neighborhood block of street improvements, and that's currently $400,000 today's numbers. Street improvement projects have risen. The city cannot fund through its fiscal budget such as streets that are in need of repair in excess of 250. And this time it's on the voting, I think over 400,000. And then it listed i.e. Kitty Hawk Road, North Boulevard, Civil Trail, Tree Lane, and Athena. Those were all considered in that last budget year, that last bond year. The next thing that we inform the budget, the voters, when will the project begin? The project will begin in calendar year 2011. And the last thing that was put out there, what will the project involve? The proposed street improvements will include some roadway reconstruction, which involves the removal, rebuild, and the existing roadway with curbs and gutters as required. The project will also include mill and overlay of some streets, which will involve base repair and removing approximately 2 inches of existing asphalt, street surface, and replacing it with new 2-inch asphalt. So basically, we're looking at two things. We're looking at reconstruction projects. We're looking at rehabbing, which is a mill and overlay, and we do that. And because the biggest thing is, yes, we want to tackle those reconstruction projects because those are the biggest dollars that my budget operational can afford. But then we also want to tackle the mill and overlays to prevent those streets becoming reconstruction streets. So we have to balance that. And so when we go, and 30 million isn't a lot at today's prices. So when we do this, I have to look at balancing both. And so that's why we can't package that we can do this, do that, do that. We haven't even engaged an engineer because we don't got a vote on this yet. So once we have a vote on this, that we're doing it, that comes expensive because we got to hire the engineers, we got to do geo, go out and do densities on all the streets, cores, everything. So that's when we start spending money on this to do it. And then when we get to that point, we'll do presentations like this that were done in 2010. Basically showing you the overview of the project and then showing you the different packages. So we presented different packages to the city council and it broke it up. So at that time, that's when you really look at, can we do this differently or can we do that? And then we provide you with alternatives. Maybe there's a street, because the biggest thing, if we can spread that money, that we can do this for 30 million, but for some reason if our bids come low, we have these alternate streets that we can put in, and we've done that in the past and stuff like that. So these are the presentations that we will have, but our list is long, so the need is still there. I still got more highlighting to do on this sheet to get it completed.
And while he's taking a breath, I want to address specificity again too. So I'll start with a general question. Does anybody in here know when TxDOT does a call for projects? And the answer is no, we don't know. They all of a sudden turn around and say, hey, we're going to do a call for projects. We're going to cover these things. The city needs to have their match.
What's a call for projects, sorry?
Where they're providing matching funding for road programs, road and drainage, things of that nature. I apologize.
It's an application.
Talking jargon.
I'm a newbie.
Yeah, they do a call for projects and they say, hey, as an entity, we have $1 billion. We're doing added capacity. Everybody submit your projects. We'll do the ranking. Tell us what your match is going to be. And then if you get awarded, you have to do the project. They're not going to wait around for us to go back and do a bond election. Let's say our project gets selected. They're not going to wait around for us to go back and do a bond election in order for us to say that we have the funding. This is where Rose is talking about. Council will then turn on a dime and say, hey, we have this option of, let's say, this $2 million road project. And if we do it, our match is, what would it be, $400,000. And then we have other projects that we can throw in with it. Should we issue the bonds to cover this and participate in this program? Or are we going to let it pass us by and spend our own $2 million and just let the project move on? We don't know in TxDOT. They did a call for projects.
East Aviation was our last one.
Was our last one. We did not expect that. We've submitted that before. They didn't fund it. All of a sudden they said, this is the type of project we want. We submitted it. They selected it. We used bond money to pay for that project. The other thing that happens is the CBDG funds, Community Development Block Grants. They are always throwing money out and saying, hey, cities, do this kind of street and drainage improvement in this, and the match is even less. And we go out for those every year, but sometimes the project may be a very large project, and in order to meet the CDBG requirements, we have to go to the bond fund monies that we have available and issue bonds in order for the city to complete that project and to get the CDBG funds. Those are the turn on the dime type of things that you have to plan for, and you can't stop the whole process that they have in place and go out to the voters to get funding approved. You have to be ready, as they call it into the industry. What do they call that? Shovel-ready projects. You have to have shovel-ready projects when they do their call. And not only shovel-ready, but you better have finance ready for it to do it too. So that's one of the reasons why we don't go into specificity as well. Because things happen that we don't know that may be of an advantageous situation for the city. And we have to move, and we have to move quickly.
And I will tack onto that shovel-ready. This is 2021 numbers, and the county contacted me about looking at having shovel-ready projects. So these are streets down on our lower side which are eligible for CDBG funding. And so this is a list that goes from Beechwood, I'll just name off some, National Boulevard, Rosewood, Scott, Crockett, East Burr, Lindbergh, Austin, Houston, Flintstone, Hillcrest, everything that's in CDBG eligible. $36 million right here, just on these streets down at that end. These are shovel ready because they were looking at possibly we could be eligible to apply for those. It hasn't yet come through yet, but we have these ready to go. The numbers have to be updated, but these are ready to go. But you know, some of the other streets in the city that we are looking at, we haven't committed, but on the different areas of town, West Aviation, we have Travis, we have Medicine Rock, Gamblewood, Lodgewood, Churchwood, Kingswood, Meadow Arbor, Tumblewood, West Oak, Meadowland, High Oak, Clear Oak, Phoenix Drive, Oak Meadows, Virgil, Wayne, Wynn, Oaklane, Suncliff, Red Horse Circle, Sage, Castle Klein, West Burke. These are all eligible streets that we're looking at that are all around the city, not just in one end of town. So, but these are ones that are eligible to be done. How much we can do, this is 36 million, that doesn't even include these over here. So we have a lot to do.
It's much higher than.
And it never ends. So I know, like last year, I think we did, we finished Balboa, Universal City Boulevard, East Aviation. They're done, but guess what? They're still back on the list because 20, 30 years, hopefully 50 years,
50 years, yeah.
a council and an audience and residents will having the same discussion. Hey, we have roads, they need to be done. It never ends. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
Okay. What's before us this evening, I'm saying on this item is to call for bond elections, so let the citizens make that decision. Okay, this is what we're doing right now. We're taking a look at saying, okay, citizens, this is the minimum that we need, and so it's up to you to make that call. So we're not making the call tonight. We're just trying to make the call potentially of opening up an election in November, that the citizens would make that decision, not council. You making that clear right now? Okay, all right, so discussion. Let me entertain a motion first, then we'll open up to discussion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Shelby.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Najarian. Now it's open for discussion. All right, Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Victor, quick question on the interest rates. We know they're going up right now. What calculation did you plan on an increase in bond rates?
So I assumed that if it was approved, we'd be selling bonds a year from now. I'm assuming about a 3.5%. If we're in the market today, it'd probably be in the high 2% range. I have some cushion on there. As we move along in time, I go from 4.75 to about 5% interest rate. These are 20-year bonds. The city's credit rating is magnificent, as we talked about before. You're AA+. You would not have an issue going into the market, and you'll probably get the best market rates available at the time. But like I said earlier, my crystal ball is pretty foggy. But in our opinion, what we've been seeing right here, rates did shoot up quite a bit this past year. But keeping that in mind, we built in that cushion moving forward. But I don't know what rates are going to be next year, so we added some cushion.
Yeah, that's the main thing. We're planning for money to get more expensive to borrow.
Yes.
Okay. How many? And I know I've seen the list a couple times, and of course I haven't ever memorized it, but how many bonds do we have that will fall off in the next 10 years at the same time that will kind of because I would imagine you calculated that as well, because we've been borrowing money since 2010.
Right,
And
while
further
he's
back.
looking that up, I'll use the last issuance that we did, the 2.1 million that you approved maybe 3 months ago, which was the last of the 2010 bond money. And so when we start looking at when we're going to issue bond, we look at the interest rate, we also look at what's going to roll off. So when we did the 2.1 million, we looked at it, and that's why Victor had made the recommendation that we defease some of the bonds, which we did, which helped with our bond rating and our cash flow. And then we looked at the interest rate, and we tried to do the funding so that it would not raise the INS tax rate for the property owner. Unfortunately, with the property valuation going down, it did raise that tax rate, but we did our best that we could to keep the rate flat for everyone.
So on the GO side, thank you for the time. On the GO side, we have issued debt not only for the street program, but we issued another tool called certificates obligation for utility system improvements. So they take care of that debt, and we don't set a tax rate to repay that debt. But just to go down the list here, we have GO bonds series 2013. Those will be paid off. Actually, were paid off Monday. That was the last payment. We have GO bonds series 2015. Those were paid off this current fiscal year through what we call a defeasement, when we had used cash on hand to pay that off. Then we have GO bonds series 2016. Those are paid off in 2025. And then after that, we have GO improvement and refunding bonds series 2019, paid off in 2028. And then just a few months ago, as you know, we issued the last increment of the 2010 bond program. That was a 20-year issuance, so that'll be paid off in 2031.
I have a couple more just reiteration questions here. So, actually, one prior. Randy, how many streets did we actually, are you able to guesstimate how many we actually accomplished from the 2010 bond?
I'd have to add them up, but they're all, yeah, I have them.
Okay. I'll ask a separate question while you're looking that up. So, reiterative here. If we get a $30 million bond approval, the ability just to evaluate if we want to borrow money. That's all we're asking the council or the citizens to do in this bond election, is to say, look, we trust you, the city council, to look at any bond need going forward up to $30 million and issue that debt. Not issue $30 million the day that you pass this authorization.
That's correct, and although you can do that, I think the intent is not to do that. It's up to you and future councils on when and how to issue that.
But the council has the final authority on any money borrowed, no matter what the city wants to come. This is not a blank check for the city to spend. They have to run it through council every single time.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. And then I do want to reiterate this. In a way, it's kind of a benefit. If you're 65 and older or close to turning 65, if you were to approve this bond, you're getting free money at that point, because you are not seeing any increase in your taxes because of the INS rate going up as we borrow. The only people that will be affected are people who are 64 younger and are not filed as disabled, and businesses in the city will carry the burden of any borrowed money. And so if I was 64 this year and I turn 65 next year, I'm only going to see 1 year of increase on this, and then my taxes will never change as far as the city goes. Cool. So it just leaves this down to those of us who are under 65. Thank you. Did you have an answer?
28.
Thank you.
To your question about what debt do we have, if you go to your budget presentation, which debt service is in the pink color, page 21, it tells you what they are and the year that they get paid off and what they're for.
Sorry, which one?
Debt
Page
service,
21.
page 21.
Oh.
In your budget presentation.
I'll have to go look.
If you want to see that in writing.
I don't have that handy, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hirobi, I said it right?
Oh, yeah, Victor's fine.
Right.
It's easier.
Can this be done in May, on the election?
Yeah, it could be At your choice, under state law, you could do November, you could do May. That's the option for this council.
You mentioned it several times our evaluations are going around 9%, and it looks to me like you've completely taken out the frozen accounts. Is that kind of how you?
Well, we don't, we get we use what we're given, and we were provided those from the Bear County appraisal district when the values were certified. We just take that bottom line figure and we utilize that in our model.
Okay, but the frozen accounts do still pay. So
Yeah, we still add a little bit of credit to in our detailed spreadsheet. We still add value because there's still, as you know, going to be a frozen component that's still going to you're still going to get some revenues out of that as the year progresses.
Okay, and this technical question, so feel free to say if you don't know the answer to it, but as the INS rate goes up over time on a frozen account, the INS gets paid first. Is that your understanding too? So that if the frozen account's short, it's going to make the INS will get paid fully, right? And then whatever's left over will go to the general fund. Is that kind of how it generally works?
Yeah, I would refer to the bond attorneys on that more technical question, but on the for the frozen values, it's not the rate that's frozen, it's the levy that's frozen.
Correct. But the INS gets paid first, I think. So it would be, if our INS rate goes up a lot, it's going to chew up more of the frozen, which will hurt the general fund in the long term, presumably, maybe.
We will always pay off the bond payment before we will put the money in the general fund. I believe that's what you're asking.
Right, it's just the frozen.
We'll pay our debt first, yes.
Correct. So on your presentation, you mentioned the 2036 projected rate, which is around 12. Do you know what the 2036 projected rate would be if we don't pass the bonds?
If you don't pass the bonds and you don't issue debt ever again, that rate, and depending if the values grow as we're conservatively projecting, it could be anywhere from 3 to 5 cents. And so, but again, I can't answer that completely today because I don't know what future councils are going to do. Then, between now and then, they might have other debt needs and they might issue other stuff. So I guess it's not, I can't say that give you a definitive answer that that's what the rate is going to be. Just like I can't tell you that it's going to be the 12 cents.
But it is fair to say that we are paying off a lot of bonds, and the INS rate will go down precipitously if we don't.
Yeah, if you don't issue debt, yeah, then you reduce that INS tax rate, and you don't issue that debt, and you don't address the needs in that fashion.
Okay. Well, your March presentation had the 2036 rate at around 361, so 3 cents and 3.61 cents. How do you say that? So to me, it looks like a difference of almost 9 cents, which would be under your example of the $295,000 home. It'd be about $258 a year, about the cost of the bond.
Yeah, in 2036. Yeah.
And so, how long are we paying that extra amount?
Well, it depends because the tax rate, even if you issue the bonds, the tax rate is still, it's not going to stay at 12 cents forever after you issue the full $30 million program, because the bonds that you've issued, let's just say you start next year, those are going to start falling off the book, and based on future council, they say we don't want to do 20 years, let's do 15 years, and you'll get out of debt earlier, and you could reduce that tax rate sooner. So. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm not here to say that it's going to stay at 20 or 12 cents forever. From 2000, let's say you issue the last bond in 2035. I'm not saying that it's going to stay at 12 cents. It'll decrease, primarily not so much with the interest rates that we get for the future bonds, but what our property values are doing at that time. And so, of course, that I can't predict either.
And the other thing that we can't predict is, let's say, that it gets approved and the council makes its first 1 or 2 issuance, then we get into the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round, and the other ones are still on the books. It's not to say that an interest rate doesn't come in lower at a future date where it would make sense for us to refinance some of the previous debt that is yet to be paid off and roll it in with that new bond package, just because there's a cost savings to the city in terms of interest. That happens as well. So you have new finance and you have refinance, and sometimes they can happen under the same council authorization if there's a cost savings to the city. And that's what Victor and his firm do, is they watch that. They watch the market, they watch the rates. They give us indication when something is up for refinance, when it makes sense for us to refinance it, what should we roll into the refinancing with, when should it happen, and that's the information that we bring back to whatever council is seated at that time, and y'all make that decision.
We've had great success, and the timing has been perfect. And many of those that we've refinanced, and every single one in my 26 years has gone down, every single time. Because it's being watched very carefully. And that's very important. That's a good point, Ken. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take advantage whenever we can if interest rates come down. I just can't tell you when that's going to be, if at all.
Hey, your crystal ball is no different than anybody else's crystal ball.
And again, just to reiterate, this is all estimates. If, like as Ms. Turner indicated, if an opportunity came up where we could just do a matching portion of it and then they finance the other, then we could decide to issue less of that. So again, these are all just
There are many options available to staff and council to make those decisions down the line.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Phil?
I have one more, sorry. So, Mr. Turner, I'll let you off the hot seat.
All right, thank you.
So, why 30 million? Why not like 50 or 60?
Well, what we did is we went back and looked at the last bond that we did and how much bang we got for our buck. And then we went out and we looked at some of the major street projects that we have coming up. And we kind of gave an estimate of what we thought those were going to cost. Plus, we added in some additional for the cost increase that we've seen. And we realized that what we did with 20 million, the 28 streets that we did, we won't get 28 streets with 28 million right now. You're going to get a lot less. So in order to keep the momentum going, we feel like it's better if we issue 30 million. And maybe we don't do it all at once, as Victor has said. Maybe we just do it in smaller issuances depending on when it happens and what our tax rate is. So again, it's just affording flexibility and being prepared to meet whatever the market has at the time when road projects come up.
And so why are we projecting on over 15 years? Why not something smaller and do it in increments to ask the voters to approve it?
I think it goes back to the specificity and the ability to turn on a dime. How much money are you willing to let go that's out there for other road programs that we could take a stab at getting and having our matching fund? How much of that are you willing to let go until you decide to wait to go and ask the voters, can we do this project? Will you allow us to issue this debt?
And why now are we hearing about anything about a plan? I mean, we've kind of talked about through the year. This year it's been hinted that we were talking about a $30 million bond might happen. And only now, like Rainey's kind of mentioning, well, we have the list, we don't want to share it, I guess. We don't want to have a conversation with anybody about what might happen or have a contingency in there for a grant match, or why now it's the last minute and we had to approve it now for a November election? Why couldn't we have been discussing this in the summer?
It's not last minute. We've been talking about it for over a year. We've made presentations to council. Victor has been here. We've had the discussion. Rose has been here a couple of times. Randy has been here. Noelle has been here. So it's not like we just decided all of a sudden we were going to have it. We've been talking about it since we knew that we were near the end of our last $20 million issuance. And we've been advising the council that we are out of street funding for major road reconstruction and rehabilitation, and that we needed to move forward with a bond issue. And we have been planning all along to do it this November. We started planning last November for this November.
Okay, and so it was just me that was kept in the dark, or I just missed it?
Were you at the meetings? We had the conversations.
The meeting before I was elected, you talked about, do we want to do a $30 million bond? That was
Yeah, but we
discussed.
talked about it before that. We've been talking about it for a very long time.
Okay,
I think the discussion over the period of months and months and months was that we need to take a solid look at the fact that we have this is our last increment of the $20 million. We've got to look at the future and what's it going to be. So this has been a discussion item that staff and council have looked at occasionally. This is the first time it's been officially presented, because in order to get it on that November bond, the election, to the citizens to make that decision, we have to do it now. If
And
you
I would
wanna
also
try to
add
postpone
in
it,
that-
that's, you know,
I
that's.
apologize, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I also want to add in that in all these years that we've been doing the issuances, the 5 issuances we've done with the 20 million, every time we get to that, we talk about how much do we have left and when do we need to start thinking about a new issuance. So it's a rolling process. We don't decide just overnight that we need to do a bond election.
I think
mean, it's a
when we,
huge, expensive
I think we
process.
approved the $20 million, we already knew that we were gonna have to start something else pretty soon after that. Because the need was far, far, far exceeded what the money was gonna be able to supply.
And I think it would be short-sighted of staff and council if we weren't doing long-range planning like this. That's our goal, right? To be visionaries and to determine what is best for the city, short-term and long-term. And street project is a long-term endeavor, and it's long-term that never goes away.
Very much so. Okay, Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to all of you that have come out here this evening to share your expertise with us. I do have a question about the valuations and how the over 65 tax freeze resulted in a reduction of our overall property evaluation. So stop me at any time if what I say is not correct, okay? The over 65 tax freeze froze the valuations at the 2021 values. Yes? Okay.
It froze the levies. The amount that the taxpayer pays, that's what's frozen.
Did it freeze the amount, the valuation of their property? Or the taxable valuation, essentially the taxable valuation of their property was frozen?
No, that does not happen.
Okay, because what I'm trying to understand is if the amount of money that the over 65 households were going to be paying is essentially staying the same, and that was about 1,900 properties, I believe, in Universal City. And the other 5,000 properties in Universal City, generally speaking, increased in value. How did our overall valuations go down? It's absolutely inconceivable to me, and since I got the agenda packet, I've been trying very hard to wrap my head around this. If the property values for the if one subset of the city isn't going to be paying more, and the remainder of the properties in Universal City significantly increased in value, how in the world did our valuations go down by 9% in 1 year? So, and then the other question I have for you to address, please, is that you made the projections during the bond issuance, the last one that we did, I believe it was earlier this year. You showed your projections for property valuations going up and up and up by about 4 or 5% year over year, including for 2022. But now we've had to revise that. Instead of a 5% increase, it was a 9% decrease. What's to prevent that from happening again next year and in subsequent years where we estimate an increase of 5%, but we end up with actual decreases in value? Thank you. And then I do have some other questions following up later on.
Yeah.
Please. You want to address that, or Richard?
It's very complicated, and I know that you and I have discussed this, and I know that when numbers come, sometimes people get glossied over. So everybody has an assessed value, right? That's what's used. And then they have a taxable value, and that's after all of their exemptions are provided. So when we say tax freeze, and that somebody's taxes are frozen, on paper, their valuation goes up, but the amount of taxes that they're going to pay does not. For instance, if you had last year a $100,000 house and your tax levy, the amount of ad valorem that you needed to pay was $1,000, you paid $1,000. But if your taxable value goes up on your property and or the property tax rate goes up, maybe you would be paying, instead of your house now would be valued at $150,000, you would think, oh, well, I would be paying more taxes. No, their valuation has gone up, their assessment has gone up, the tax rate has gone up. They're still only paying $1,000. They are frozen at that amount of tax that they're going to pay. So when you are looking at the tax rate, you have to back out all the added value that you would have received revenue on from those properties, because you know you're not going to get it. So we have to assess everybody else's property taxes or the revenue, ad valorem revenue, on the increase and the total value for everybody who's not 65 or disabled. And then we calculate all of theirs separately because they are frozen at that tax levy. So if the tax rate goes up, the $1,000 person who pays $1,000 is only going to pay $1,000. But the person who is under 65 or who are the business, they're going to have to pay more. They may be paying the $1,500, and that will go on in perpetuity, because once the tax freeze is in place, it cannot be undone. That's state law. So what happens is when the tax freeze comes on to our tax roll, the tax levy, the tax roll, they're different words but sometimes interchanged. In the beginning stages, you're always going to see a dip, because if we had not have had the tax freeze and the $1,000 levy that they had to pay was $1,050, that means the city would have more revenue, and that means our tax INS would have gone down. But because we don't have the added revenue from them, but we do have it from everybody else, the INS tax rate has to go up to make up that difference. And there's always going to be a dip the first year, and then it's going to extrapolate out for all of the other years. Is that a fair assessment? It's very complicated to explain, and I'm sorry. And I'm sorry to everybody else too. It is very complicated.
So I'm trying to look at it from a not complicated level. doing my best for Mr. Vinci out there.
Yeah. Keep going.
If everybody that's over 65 is going to pay the same amount of ad valorem taxes in 2022 as they did in 2021, and we keep the rate exactly the same, our ad valorem tax rate exactly the same as we did last year, and those over 65 are going to pay the exact same amount, all the other properties that are not subject to the over 65 would pay significantly more if we leave our ad valorem tax rate at 58 cents per $100 of valuation. Those other residents in Universal City would pay a significantly higher amount, so if theirs stays the same, the 65 and over, and everybody else pays more by leaving the tax rate exactly the same, later on in the budget meeting tonight, we're going to propose potentially raising the tax rate by about 10 cents per $100 of valuation. That still doesn't make sense to me. And
You are so close.
I think what we need to do, Mr. Buck, is be very careful, because we're going to be getting into that in intimate detail very, very soon. Those exact same questions are going to come up when we look at the budget and the proposed tax rate.
Okay, so I also have something for council. We've been discussing the possibility of reallocating some of the funding from the venue tax to a street tax at some point in the future. Okay, I don't want to get into that discussion tonight, but at some point in the future, if we do that, that 0.25% sales tax, no matter whether we choose to keep some of it going to the golf course, some of it to street repair, something like that, is going to represent a significant increase in the amount of money that will be coming into the city for street repairs. I want to throw it out on the table that since we're considering doing that at some point in the future, instead of requesting permission to issue $30 million of bonds, could we, over 6 years, could we request approval to issue $20 million of bonds with the understanding that at some point in the future, and I'm throwing this out there because this is something that people have come to me and said, and I want to put it out there for discussion, that if we put it out there for 20 million, understanding that there's a good possibility that we'll bring in that additional revenue by reallocation from that tax.
Okay, I think that's interesting. It's a good point, valid point. But remember, what we're trying to do here this evening is to give the voters an opportunity to approve not to exceed $30 million. It could be less over the time period, over that time. We want to give them at least an option to look at a ceiling. And then if the voters approve that, then staff will make recommendations back to us at council. We will decide on what number, what increments we will use. And if it goes only to about $18, $20 million, then that's what it'll do. We can still do that.
Okay, so we'll let the voters decide.
Or you end up doing,
My
or you
recommendation
have
is
your
we
30
continue to look
million.
at the 30 million level at this juncture and not try to slice it up at this time, because the voters can make that decision for us.
And I think you have to be very careful about what you're committing future councils to do with the venue tax, whether it's this council or the next council or the next council. I think you have to be careful about that. But given your supposition, even if you did the 30 million and then you found that you had additional to go out and do road projects, you would just take that money and add it into the 30 million. Because maybe you want to do more than 28 projects. Maybe you want to do 36 projects.
I absolutely understand that.
You're just leaving the door open for yourself and for future councils.
Yes, ma'am, I was just throwing the possibility out there of something that
Gotcha.
could be looked at as a possibility.
Gotcha. Okay, Mr. Najarian.
Okay, thank you. Fantastic presentation by everybody. There was a lot of questions that I've had, a lot of questions that I got from emails from people, but you've pretty well answered all those. One thing I want to caution real quickly is that I disagree with the fact that you have brought up that we've discussed this possibility of venue tax going to street maintenance. We have not had this discussion at all yet. This has not been up for discussion. We have gone down, I believe we have said we would put it on the agenda for a future discussion about the venue tax, getting rid of the venue tax, but we have not at all discussed the fact that if we did that, where that money would go. And I want to caution us on getting and putting any information out there that is not correct. We have not had that discussion yet at all. Actually, with everything that's been going on, tonight might have been a good night to have that on the agenda, but we sure have a whole lot on our plate. Probably would say that for another time. Tell me if I'm wrong on that. We have not had that discussion. We have not. And that's the time we discuss that, as far as where that goes, if we decide to do anything on it at all. The next thing, thank you very much, and I'm just going to put it out there since I had the questions, and you've already answered it, but I kind of dumped down for me too. What would be the downfalls, if any, if we didn't do 30, we did 15, just break it in half, we'd have a bond issue here, and then we do, we vote on another bond, 15 million for another time.
Let me address that, I think. What we're trying to be able to do here, if the taxpayers approve that, is to get the best possible rate that we can at the $30 million level or whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong here, that level. And if we were to reduce that, that would be okay, but then that would be the only level we would have. So if we go at the 30, the taxpayers approve it at the $30 million level, then they can work on that the rate that they could give us at that level rather than at a lower level. I mean, I'm trying to be oversimplified, but I think I'm right.
And I believe you are right. I just want to put that up for simpler terms. That again, you've answered that question because there's I believe there's in everybody's head that if we pass a $30 million bond, we are committed to $30 million of that bond right now. We're not talking about this is something that we can do. And I kind of take I've heard the term through this giving the city a blank check, and I don't believe it's any of that. One other thing I'd just like to put out there, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, the difference between, putting it off, we have a November election, we have a May election. I believe the difference here would be the benefit of having it in November than in May, is we all know that we have a heck of a lot bigger voter turnout on our November elections than we do in May. So if we did do this, we would get a better cross-section of people showing up and telling us what they really want for this city. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How much money did we get from outside funding, from the ability for us to issue bonds to get work over the last 10 years? Estimate.
Between CDBG and your MPO projects, what do you think you're in the last 10 years?
Last 10 years, that's tough. I know our biggest one.
Maybe just name the project.
Yeah, it would have been our East Aviation and probably Kitty Hawk, because Kitty Hawk was one of the first ones. But those were MPO funded, so our East Aviation was like close to $7 million, and then the state covered 69% or 70% of that project. So we only had to furnish 30% on that particular project.
So if we were in one of those situations where we asked voters for 15 million, and 5 years, 10 years goes down the road, and we have 12 million left of that 15, and we have the opportunity to get another 70-30 project, we're potentially going to miss out on that, because we'll have to wait for an election cycle. We have to get approval again from voters for additional bond money, or bond approval, excuse me. And by that time, the project's gone. And I remember when we did the MPO project for East Aviation. And I believe we also tried to do that for the lower, the bridge that we want to build over Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, we didn't get funded for that.
Which we did not get funded for. So in the case of flexibility, it's not just flexibility, it's the ability, it's also being able to turn our 30 million into potentially 50 million at no additional cost. Is that a safe statement to say? I mean, if I'm shooting over on the numbers.
Yeah, because we basically, that money that we saved by going to that issuance with the state, the remaining portion that we didn't have to pay for out of that 7 million is now the issuance that y'all just issued, that 3.1 that we're doing on National and East Lansing. So we're able to use those money that would have, if we didn't get that state funding, it would have went all into that project. But we're able to go out and do these other streets, as well as the upcoming Civil Creek roadway to our ETJ as well.
So that actually helped us with that.
Yes.
And I think we have to be careful about psychologically what we ask of our residents, and I'll use it as like a parent-child relationship, because we've all had children, and if you have 3 or 4 children, hey, can I have $50 for this? And then the next one walks by and says, oh, so-and-so's having a birthday party, I need $100 for a gift, and then I'll use Mr. Goldsby since he's not here. Oh, I'm in theater and we're going on a theater trip. I need $500 for my airline ticket, $900 for this. The question is how many times can you go back before they get sick of you, right? Gimme, 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 gimme. When we put it out there, a larger amount for a long term, and they know that we are good stewards of their public trust and the finances of the city, and that we're just going to do it in small increments when it doesn't impact them, without having to go back to them and still having the ability to turn on a dime. I think it's better for the community as a whole. I mean, look at the discussion we're having here. How many times do we want to put the public through this discussion? And how much burden do we want to put on future councils to go back through and have this discussion with the residents over and over again? I don't know,
Okay.
I think psychologically it's better.
You finish up, and I'll give Mr. Vaughan for one last comment.
Yeah, and so 3 quick statements. One, if they say no, we can just come back for less.
We can come back for less, or we can wait a year, or we can come back again, or we can wait 2 years, or we can come back with a higher amount, a lower amount, a different amount, whatever it happens to be. Understanding that the road projects
Don't
aren't
start.
going to change, and they don't start.
Right, but in the same way that that election can say yes or no to authorize us to issue up to $30 million, us, and whoever us is over the next 20 years, won't be me. That's the same type of election that would determine whether or not that the venue tax gets reallocated. The council will not be making that decision. That will go to the voters. And so if we plan for the voters to say we don't want this money to go to the golf course, and then the voters say, no, we want it to go to the golf course, we just paint ourselves in a corner because now, and I don't know what they're gonna vote. I don't know, and we don't know. And so we're planning on something that is a literal roll of the dice. I'm looking at the election from 2010, where the bond election that was approved in 2010 passed with 389 for and 344 against.
And
It
how
was
many
that close.
we spent almost an hour talking about this. How many complicated issues do you want to put on the ballot that require voter education? I mean, God bless everybody that's here tonight, because they'll be the most educated residents on street bonds and street bond issuances. But could you task any one of them to go out there and explain it to their neighbor? Probably not. What if we have 3 items like that on a given ballot? Oh my gosh, how do you handle that communication method?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Vaughan.
Okay, well, I just think we should all take a moment and understand the gravity of what we're deciding. I mean, this is $4,200 in debt for every property owner. It's $1,500 for every man, woman, and child in Universal Cities that we're asking them to give us the authorization. I know everybody loves me, but I know there's some people out there that are not very happy that I'm sitting in this seat. By voting for this, you're allowing a whole bunch of fills that might get elected up here and that would control all this money for the next 15 years. You might trust everybody up here except for me, or you might trust Kim and Randy. What if they get hit by a bus? We're gonna give them the authority, whoever's up here, to issue all this tax. I just think it's important that we consider that. The taxpayers entrust us to really consider all of the angles here, and if we're gonna be projecting 15 years out in the future for the bonds, I think we should be projecting 15 years out in the future for all of our other revenue streams. We should be considering how we should pay for this, how we want to structure this, not just defaulting to the taxpayers. And I know there's a faction in the city that's not very happy with the direction that we're in, and you might think they're misguided, you might think they're mean-spirited, whatever you want to think of those people. I don't think we want to underestimate their ability to kill this election. And it's not free, it's expensive, especially in November. We're not going to have a cost because we don't have anything on that agenda, on that election. It would cost money for us to do that. If we did it in May, it would not cost as much, and it would give us more time to plan this out, give them a picture. I disagree that I don't think the citizens are as selfish or as childlike as you say. I think we should tell them, from Randy's list, here's the list, they're the highest priority. We can put in a contingency for grants. If a grant comes up, we're going to jump on it. We can explain how we would direct that money, at least give them some thought process of how we would use this money before just defaulting to $30 million. I think we should postpone this to a May election and have a little bit more discussion. Maybe I'm the only one that doesn't feel like I have an understanding how the money would be used. Maybe I'm just out of it. That's possible. But I think we should postpone this and have a better plan and have a better chance of passing it on.
Okay. That's your position. Okay. I think Mr. Neville, you want to weigh in?
I understand what Councilmember Vaughan is saying, but it seems to me that the people that need to make the decision, not the 5 of us, 6 of us up here tonight, but all of those out there in the chairs and in the city, their vote, your vote, can decide whether this goes forward or whether it goes not. If you decide yes, we get the money and we can do things with it as soon as possible at a lower cost. If you vote no in November, then we can come back and have another bond election in May. Personally, I think you're the one that should make the decision, not us up here tonight. Thank you.
But our decision that we want to make tonight, if you agree with this, and we have a motion and a second,
the motion
is to
yes
go to a $30 million that would go to the voters in November.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the motion and the second that's been made. I think we've really discussed it for almost a full hour and a half. So Is there any other specific comments that are different than we've discussed last hour? I think all these points are extremely well taken. All right, Chris, call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
No.
Okay, that motion passes. All right, before we move on to tab C, it has been almost a full, well over an hour and a half. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be right back. Nature does call upon just about every one of us to drink water.
I did not go to ACOG, I went to UCEDC, and it was good. I went to a lot.
Can I get council members back up? Let's get going.
You move a lot faster
I don't know. Sorry, Steve. Give us some snacks in case we get a little bit hungry. Okay. That's all we got for the moment. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Let's get back on track here to go to under business to tab number C now, which is to consider and approval of a financing plan for the issuance of Waterworks and Sewer System Revenue Bonds, Series 2022. Kim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is $4.5 million and Waterworks and Sewer, which we typically call utilities. Again, we've been planning for this quite some time. As you remember, when we went through our preliminary budget, Randy talked about the capital improvement program for the utility system. And so he's going to make a presentation first, and then Victor's going to come up and talk about the funding.
Get ready? All right, Mayor, Council, before you have the $4.5 million water, wastewater bond infrastructure projects, it will consist of a 1 million gallon ground storage tank, well number 12 drilling and development. This is the former well number 5 that we recently had to cap due to deterioration of the casing that we had in the ground. Acquisition of a 3.9 acre land here right off the area of Centerbrook, and then the Kitty Hawk sanitary sewer outfall line. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this is the 1 million gallon tank. We've had this one on schedule for a while now. Basically, this was a tank that we purchased. This used to be the wells and the tank, a little history on this. It used to belong to the city of Schertz. City of Schertz this used to be their elevated for because they had no Edwards water wells in their city. So we, over the course of a couple of years, I obtained the 2 tanks that are there and the wells eventually later. But this original tank belonged to the city of Schertz. Currently, go to the next slide. You can see the deterioration of the tank, the exterior of the rim that needs to be replaced, where it bolts to the foundation there. And go to the next one. The roof actually needs to be replaced. Our last inspection, they are saying that the rafters in there, it's on the verge of not very near, but future that it can collapse on us. But you can see all the divots in that tank. Go to the next picture. And you can see the rust, that's in the hatch area. Anything that is above the water table, inside that tank, you'll see where it gets really corrosive and it eats at the metals of the tank. And so this tank is at its life, and that's the reason why we have it on here to replace. And then moving on, that's the latter interior of the tank. So this is our well site, what we originally is our well site 5. We recently, with the apartment complex, acquired additional space on this property through a perpetual easement. So this is we had to cap it due to deterioration of the casing, which was actually in the aquifer with pumping rocks and everything in there. Basically said we had to cap it, so we ended up capping it. And so we're proposing to drill the new well, which this funding source will allow us to do that on that same site. This land acquisition is for the future of the city. Long term, in the future, we will have an elevated tank that needs to be replaced. Currently, it does not need to be replaced, but in the future, The land that we're looking at is the highest elevation in this area. And so the land that we need is around it before any development would happen around that tank. Because once that development happens around the tank, then we have to take down the tank and rebuild it. But you need quite a bit of room, which currently we have to utilize the land around it to even do tank painting right now. So that's the acquisition of that property that we'll discuss later. The next slide. This is the sanitary sewer line, the Kitty Hawk, we would call it Kitty Hawk outfall line, which runs behind the HEP from Kitty Hawk. As you know, we're looking at development in that area, and this line is already at capacity. It is currently an 8-inch line that runs full. We are looking to upgrade it by pipe bursting to a 12-inch, going from 8 to 12 to add the added capacity. It will require a new bore because the old bore that runs under 64, they used to use cement to encase it. And so TxDOT, they met with TxDOT on looking at doing a new bore at that same location. And so that is also included with this bond issuance. That should be it for this presentation. Any questions on any of these?
Any questions for Randy before we move on to Victor? Yes.
Oh, he was gonna make a motion, so I'll let him finish.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Buck, second by Mr. Shelby. Any discussion? Mr. Shelby.
Hey, just a quick question. I want to make sure I understood right. We're not repairing the tank over on Kitty Hawk, we're replacing the tank. That's a full tear down and replacement. And what elevated tank does that actually fill? Because that's a riser, isn't it?
So everything in that particular location fills the upper tier, which is the million gallon that we have right on top of the road there, behind the Bank of America.
Okay, and so that will, during that time frame, will that affect that tank, that elevated tank?
No, we're fortunate, right next door, we have a 250,000 gallon tank that is in good shape right next to it. And then off of Kitty Hawk, we have a 500 gallon tank. So those two tanks will feed into that lower tier, while this one's under construction.
Okay. What's the time for completion on something like that outfall line?
We'll look at, that one's probably, with pipe bursting, it goes fairly fast. It would probably be a 90-day contract for that size line. It all depends on the material, which is the pipe itself. Depends on where they are with the production of that size pipe. That could be the only delay that we have. Typically on this project, it's usually a 90-day contract.
Do we have prices locked in for any of these projects?
We have estimates currently right now.
Okay, so do we expect any increases with everything that's going on, or we got a pretty decent lock?
No, there's no sure problem. But we do have leftover bonds that I'm looking at that will cover any additional expenses that we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Adjournment.
Just a quick question, the Kitty Hawk upgrade, going underground, boring a new hole, will that affect traffic at all, or does that?
It will affect the tie-in at Kitty Hawk, so we'll have some traffic control on Kitty Hawk. That would be the only location that would.
And how long is that normally?
That could take about 2 weeks. It all depends on, because they will have to excavate and pull through that. They'll probably be utilizing some of that parking lot of the church as well to make that, to accomplish that pull. But it all depends on which way they do it. They have different ways.
Done during Thanksgiving or Christmas.
No, we'll not be down there that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Randy, thank you for the presentation. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. This is a connection from like the Coronado Village area that's going to that services those houses. Is it flowing from Coronado towards Meadowland?
Correct. This is the major outfall. So everything from Coronado all the way up to Getty's, that shopping center up in there, everything, Retalmo Apartments, everything north
on that side of Kitty Hawk.
On that side comes through that line right there.
Okay, and then it connects to another one here. When I first looked at this, I thought, oh my gosh, is it just dumping out into the storm drain? No. Oh, it's actually connecting to another sewer, right?
Yes, it connects to another sewer. So that's our other outfall that has already been replaced. So everything from FM 78 which is in Commerce, we've already pipersed everything to that point right there. So this is the last part of that outfall right there.
Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All right, let's call for the
We
vote, then, please,
haven't
Chris.
done the financing plan.
Oh, we got the finance part.
Yeah, thank you.
Talked about the rates.
We appreciate your enthusiasm.
Oh, we're having so much fun. Time-wise. Victor, sorry, man.
Oh, no, it's okay, thank you. Well, I'm back again, and so now we're talking about a financing plan for the issuance of Waterworks and Sewer System Revenue Bonds Series 2022 to fund the projects that Randy just illustrated and went over with you. So we prepared a brief presentation to talk to you about allowing us to move forward with the documentation necessary to issue the financing for those projects. And so if you go to the first page after the cover sheet, the city intends to raise $4.5 million to fund the projects that Randy indicated. The financing tool that we would be using are called Waterworks and Sewer System Revenue Bonds, Series 2022. This type of financing tool has been utilized by the city in the past. With your approval today, we're not actually locking in interest rates yet. You're just allowing me and my staff and the city to continue moving forward with the document preparation necessary to go into the market. We anticipate going into the market after we talk to the rating agencies and prepare the documents, going into the market on Tuesday, September 6th at your next scheduled council meeting. At that point, I will come back to you and give you the results of that financing, of that pricing. I'll let you know what interest rate we're going to lock in on this financing. Then we would schedule a closing date for October 4th where the funds are electronically wired to the city's project account to fund these projects. No further meeting is necessary outside of the September 6th one. If you go to the next page, just very quickly an overview as to this type of financing tool called revenue bonds, Waterworks and Sewer System Revenue Bonds. One important thing to point out is that if you issue these bonds, the security mechanism that bond investors have is not tied at all to your property taxes, so property taxes will never be used for the repayment of this debt. The only security mechanism that they have are the revenues that you generate from your utility system moving forward. Two key points, because we're not tying this to any property taxes. When you look at revenue bonds, there's two main what we call bond covenants or bond promises that we made to previous bondholders and to these potential bondholders. The first one has to do is that we have to maintain a minimum revenue coverage of 1.5 times average annual debt service. So we have to look at all of your existing utility system debt, and we also include some of the certificates of obligation we've issued in the past in addition to this new debt. And our minimum revenue that we have to generate to support our average annual debt service payment is 1.25 times. That's a pretty standard bond covenant for revenue bonds, specifically utility system revenue bonds. Currently, with what we have on the books right now and what we propose with the $4.5 million, that coverage, or currently is at 4.17. So we're well above that minimum coverage that we need. Just so you know, if we ever get down below that coverage, at that point the council will have to start taking action and considering some utility system revenue increases to support your debt, but right now we're not at that point. The final and most important, and also an important covenant is that we have to maintain a reserve fund equal to 1 year's worth of, or average annual debt service payment, and so that has to be reserved in a reserve fund, and so we're on our way with that. The next page, very detailed, this is page 3. This is a pro forma debt service coverage analysis. What I'm doing here is, I apologize, it's small, but basically this is looking at only your utility system, what debt we have on the books right now. Column A is your fiscal year, column B is system revenues of $9.8 million. We got that number from your fiscal year ending 2021 audit that we received. Column C, I'm not projecting any growth in that revenue. I'm just leaving it static for this presentation purpose and what we show bond investors. Column D are your maintenance and operation expenses out of your utility system, 5.9 from your 2021 audit. Again, I'm not projecting growth for these illustration purposes. Column B is how much we have available after you look at your revenues and you net out your expenses. We have $3.9 million of revenue. for debt service payments now and moving forward. Column G is your existing utility system. We've issued 2 different bonds solely directly from the utility system. We also, in column H, have some certificates obligation that we've issued in the past that are solely paid by the utility system, so we count that into how much you owe. Column I is a 20-year issuance for $4.5 million. I'm assuming an interest rate of 4% for just to be conservative. And then the next column J, is everything combined, your existing debt plus your new debt. Column K is your net debt service, and then column M, the final one on the right side, that is the coverage factor. That's the most important thing that rating agencies and bond investors are going to look at. They don't want that to be 1.25 times or below, and so again, just showing it here, we're in excess of that. Even when this new debt comes in, if nothing changes with revenue or expenses, we're still at a 3.08, and just like anything else, as we continue paying off debt, that ratio will get even higher and stronger. So the higher that ratio is, the stronger you are and perceived by bond investors. Speaking of rating agencies, if you go to the next slide, the cell there in blue, this is your GO rating. This is what we call an underlying rating or your true credit rating. The highest possible bond rating you can have is a AAA. On our GO side, anything voted in that you use your INS tax rate that we talked about earlier, that is rated at a AA+, which is very strong. Our utility system is rated 1 notch lower at AA, which is still pretty strong. That's pretty standard for most cities. Again, when you issue bonds and they're secured by property taxes, bond investors prefer that because it's deemed safer than utility system revenues. And so that is why there's that one difference. But even at the AA, the utility system is considered a very strong credit. The next slide and final slide is the term sheet. This is just a summary of the financing. The bond payments will be structured just like your existing bond payments, semi-annual interest payments on March and September 1st of each year, and then annual principal payments. Starting September 1st, 2023, these payments will start your next fiscal year that you're planning for. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, as a means of enlightening people, so this presentation that Victor just gave, if going back to the previous item, we just had discussion on the calling for the bond issuance. If at any time in that 20-year period, the city council decided that they wanted to issue funding for street improvements, Victor would be standing up here and giving this same exact presentation again to city council. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that, that this is a normal and typical process on how they would see it work. It just happened to be that we're doing both parts of it in the same evening, even though it's different issues.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone? Questions of Victor or Randy? Anyone? Okay, we do have a motion and a second, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's call for the vote then, please, Chris.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
Aye.
Motion passes. Victor, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll get to work, and thank you for having me here this evening.
Your job has just begun.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to tab number D. D and E are definitely related. This is related to our city and sister cities taking care of all of our major installation right down the street from us. So let's look at it that way. So consideration of resolution DEAAG, Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant, that's what it stands for. Resolution by the city councils respectively for the city of Universal City, Live Oak, and Schertz, approving an application for a Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant related to the provision of goods and services to Joint Base San Antonio, authorizing the Alamo Area Council of Governments to submit the application and, if awarded, administer the grant on behalf of the cities, and authorizing the procurement and installation of a traffic signal preemption system. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor. By way of background, some of you may remember that at a past city council meeting, Mr. Neville had asked the question about what it would take to put in a substation, and particularly a fire and EMS substation on the other side of Loop 1604. And we did some preliminary estimates for you, and we also provided some options. One of the options that we had talked about was a traffic preemption system, and that is a device that is on the traffic signal lights, and actually it's in a box with cameras on the lights, and in all of the EMS and fire apparatus. And what it would allow them to do is, as they were traveling throughout the city, when they were within a certain distance of a traffic signal light, it will shut that light down so that they have safe passage. And obviously this is a very big time saver for emergency services, as well as a lot less cost prohibitive for the city as a whole. So when we started working on this program, it was about the time that the DSIP program came out, which is another grant program through the federal government for projects that aid in keeping the Randolph area safe. We qualified for that program, but while we were working on that, we were notified by John Anderson, he's one of our civic people from Joint Base San Antonio that we work with, that there was another Defense Economic Adjustment grant coming out, and that would we consider moving our project over to DA and tying our program in with an Army project that is happening in San Antonio, in particular a war room that they're setting up. And so we agreed that we would do that, so we've been working on this joint program with them. So Chief Caceres is not here tonight, but he is the one who's been spearheading this program since it's specifically for his department. And so he has been working with ACOG and with Schertz and with Live Oak to get cost estimates for a traffic preemption system. They have identified the firm that works most closely with TxDOT to make this happen. And so he has been working on getting the cost estimates and working with the other cities to prepare to get these projects put in place. So the first step is we actually have to submit the DA grant. It is limited to 50 pages, which is why we have a joint resolution with Schertz and Live Oak. We are very limited on what we can submit. The bigger items that they're going to want to see is obviously the war room is a little more important than our preemptive system. But by tagging on to their project, which is I think 3.7 million, we have a much higher likelihood of getting selected. So this grant authorizes the application to be submitted on behalf of Universal City. Live Oak and Schertz are considering the same resolution at their city council meetings in the next 2 weeks. So that's the overarching discussion.
DA grants are that's state money. You're not familiar with state's money, and it's a competitive basis. And I'm not sure what the last one year was 15 million, and it was 30 million. I think next year it's back down to around 15 or 16 million, whatever it may be. And that's a very competitive grant that's applied for. And in this particular case, we would work with Live Oak and Schertz, and ACOG would help administer the whole thing. And again, it's another example of us being very, very proactive in supporting a lot of the needs, especially in the safety area and wellness area for Randolph Air Force Base. And in this case, our friends in the United States Army as well. So, yes, move to Shelby. Oh, no, you don't. Let him have it. Move to approve. Second. Jerry, second by Councilmember Shelby. Discussion, anybody?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I make sure I'm completely clear on this, we were originally going to use ARPA funds to do this, were we not?
So, yeah, we're still intending to do ARPA funds for this. That's what council gave us the direction to do. So when we come back and, well, after we get our next tranche, we will come back and again do a presentation as we told you we would do a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of meetings ago, to let you know on the ARPA budget that you approved what items are in progress and what is yet to be started. And then we will make some modifications for a few other things that have been added into that budget, and that this will be added into there.
Okay, so it would be in addition to the ARPA funds, or would it not free up any of those funds for other things that we maybe could use it for?
So you remember when we did our ARPA, we did the budgeting for both tranches, and we made sure that we left well over $1 million unbudgeted.
Mm-hmm.
And so because we had no idea what stipulations the government would be putting on the use of those funds, or if the rulings would change, or if we would find other significant projects that we wanted to insert in there. So at this point, it's well within the ARPA budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Neville?
Do you have a time frame?
Okay, so there are a couple of time frames. The first time frame belongs to the DA process itself. Once you are awarded, you have 2 years to make significant progress on your project. Now remember, we're tied in with a very large project. We anticipate, depending on how Schertz and Live Oak budgeted, we have anticipated as a city that we would start in 2023 and probably finish within 11 to 12 months, depending on availability of products and the work with TechStop. The Army project will probably take longer, but one of the things that we've been working with them on is that once we start our project and we submit our invoices, that ACOG will submit right away so that we get reimbursed while Army is still working through their project. So we have the DA one, and then we have our timeline. But our timeline is very much associated with what Schertz and Live Oak can do. So until they've had their council discussions, we don't know.
And we'll make sure we keep council informed of what goes on in those 2 cities as well. And I've had discussions with their mayors. So it's obviously an opportunity for our civilian communities to take care of our neighbors in a very special way. So we do have a motion and a second. Is any discussion, anyone else? All right, Chris, call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
I'm not sure when the action is going to be taken by the other cities, but it's going to be within the next couple of weeks. Okay? All right, very good. Next item, is tab E, kind of goes in and concern this one as well, consideration of the interlocal agreement for the provision of grant writing administrative services and fiscal services for the Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant, DA, by ACOG to the cities of Live Oak, Schertz, and Universal City. This is kind of a follow-up.
So, thank you. So obviously very much connected to the last discussion that we had. What this does is the City Council is giving authority for the Alamo Area Council of Governments to not only submit the grant, but to be the administrator of the grant and handle all of the financial transactions with the state. As you can imagine, anytime you're getting funding from another higher level of government, there are so many I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed in additional financial. We felt that for us, since we're the lead on the project, that we didn't have the staffing capacity to do the entire project. So we went to ACOG and they agreed to take on the project on all of our behalf. So they'll not only be doing it for Universal City, Live Oak, and Schertz, but they'll also be doing all of the funding mechanism for the Army as well.
That is a huge plus.
Move for approval.
Motion by Councilmember Shelby, second by Councilmember Neville. Any discussion, everyone? All right, Chris, call for the vote, please, ma'am.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Great relationship with the cities, great relationship with ACOG, and it's going to pay off in dividends to support our military installations. Okay, tab F, presentation of the 2022-2023 budgets.
Yes, and as some of you know, and some of the people in the audience, we're going to be repeating a lot of stuff that we did in our last budget presentation, because obviously we want you to be fully aware of what's in the budget before you make a decision to vote on the tax rate. These next 2 items are greatly involved. For the newer council members, by law, you are required to make a record vote on the proposed tax rate, and it will be published in the newspaper. And the reason we do that is because we have to give the voters a heads up on when the public hearings are going to be held for the presentations for the public to comment on the budget. And at that same meeting, we will have a public hearing to allow them to speak on the tax rate. And that meeting is going to be August 30th at 6 p.m. in this room. And so when we post our legal notices, that date and time will be in there as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and she's going to be doing your budget presentation. And then right when she finishes with that and we're done with your questions, we will move into the presentation on the proposed tax rates for FY 2023. And we will take all your questions on what the heck, how did we get here?
I got a lot.
That's good.
Good evening. All right. Can you go to the next slide? Kristen, can you add a little extra volume?
Sorry.
Yes. Thanks, I'm playing a lot of voice.
Okay, so from previous presentation to this presentation, you will see that the general fund revenue forecast as presented is 4.6 million above the 2022 budget. What we did was increase our sales tax revenue based on our current trends and projections of growth. Still maintaining being a little conservative with not knowing what the future is going to hold as far as sales tax revenue goes. Next slide. Ad valorem increased from 874,460 from the FY 2022 budget. Sales tax revenue, as I just mentioned, increased. It did increase by 3.1 million, and total revenues increased by 4.6 million. Next slide. This is just a breakdown of how the revenues are distributed. So you can see tax revenue is at 79% with the various other areas right behind. Next slide. This is a repeat from previous presentation. The net increase to personnel was 877,000. Employee retirement did increase to 19.10% from 18.81, and then our health insurance cost did increase 15%. Next slide, total expenditures are 22.7 million. Again, a repeat. This does show the breakdown of each department and the percentages for each department. Okay, next slide, administration. There was no change here from previous presentation. Payroll, as you can see, it did increase. That does include a 5% COLA, as well as the employee retirement increase and the insurance increase, and then we also have tuition reimbursement. Development services, payroll is on here. Support services increased to 198,000. Planning is on there for 150,000, and we have some vehicles and supplies and materials also increased. This was no change from previous presentation. There was a change to finance under other equipment. The other equipment was increased from 50,000 to 75,000 to allow for the upgrades to our encode system and other systems that we use. Okay, next slide. There was no change to municipal court. Again, payroll's on there, travel and training and other expenses there. Juvenile case management, there was no change from previous presentation. General services, there was no change from previous presentation. Parks and recreation, again, no change. Police, no change. Fire, there was no change. Vehicle and equipment maintenance, no change there. The animal shelter did not have a change, nor did the library. So moving into debt service, these numbers did stay the same, so there was also no change there. There was no change to capital projects. The revenue and expenditures remain the same as previously presented. Okay, and the utility fund. Let's see. Utility fund revenue is, as presented, is 559,000 below the 2022 budget. There was a minor change of about $1,900 to balance the budget. Personnel for utility fund increased by 132,000 from last year, and again, same reasoning, the retirement and the COLA increase. Next slide shows the revenues for the utility fund by percentage. The The expenditures is on the next slide by department, again by percentages. There was no change to Public Works. There was no change to Utility Administration. Water Development did not see a change, nor did Sewer Development. Debt service did increase based on proposed numbers that we received, so I want to say it increased by $102,000. So you will see a change here with a total proposed debt, total proposed debt service with the new debt is $1.4 million. Capital improvements did not change. And then we have stormwater revenue at $1.5 million, which is $774,000 above the 2022 budget. Next slide is the revenues based on percentages. There was no change to stormwater. Next slide. And there was no change to capital projects. Okay, next slide. On the golf course, there was a change. We added $1.5 million to revenue for sales tax. As I increased the revenue in the general fund, that also increased the contribution to the golf course. So as you can see, the revenue forecast as presented is $1.8 million above the 2022 budget. Next slide. This shows the breakdown of revenue by department. You can see that 39% is in that general admin, which includes that $1.5 million increase. Next slide is the expenditures by department. The change on the general and admin also included a $302,000 administrative transfer to the general fund, and then a transfer out to stormwater for CIP project for hole 8 and 9 drainage, and that was $650,000. There was no change to horse and grounds from previous presentation. There was no change to carts from previous presentation. The pro shop did not see a change either. The range, there was no change. Food and beverage, there was no change. And marketing, there was no change. Any questions?
Okay, start out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we go back to the sewer development slide? On my packet, it was page 32. All right, let me scroll back there as well. On the SARA sewage treatment and the MMCA sewage treatment, specifically for the MMCA sewage treatment, you had the total was $1.271 million. But then when you added up those two columns, it's only got the 1.271.
I see that.
You didn't actually add just.
Thank you.
And I don't know if that's just an Excel error or a copy paste error.
It's a copy and paste error.
Or if it is going to impact the overall, all the rest of the downstream.
No, this is completely from the overall presentation that I just copy and paste.
Okay, thank you.
It's just a copy and paste error. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
I would be very happy to know that I have a handout. You can use it as paper airplane if you'd like, or you can actually look at it. But I just think it's important that we consider the salaries. They're not really included in the budget, so we didn't really have any kind of information about salaries. So just to give you an illustration of what the city's proposing, and that's the 2.5% step and then the 5% COLA. And at the budget workshop, we heard from multiple department heads they had trouble hiring at the bottom. And so if you look here, the very first column is the current average salary. So a patrol officer right now, they're at $47,468. Same thing with firefighter, they're very close, $47,978, and down there towards the bottom. And so both of those categories are going to get around $3,600 in that proposal. But then you can see there's quite a few people that are getting a lot more than that because it's just a percentage. So the people that have the higher salaries get more of it. And I think that the people at the bottom are probably having a harder time. And if we're having trouble hiring people at the bottom, I think it would be better to redirect some of our salary increases to those lower levels. And so there's a total raise from my calculation, second page, of about $615,000. And this is on current salaries, so there's some additional positions we're adding, so that would have to be factored in. But what I would propose is that the city go back to the raise and reallocate it as an even addition to everyone's pay based on those dollars. So I think it's around 4,700 is what we work out to for those people. So the police officers and firefighters would get closer to 10%, and then people at the top would get somewhere around 2 to 3%. I know that wasn't very popular at the budget workshop, but we didn't really have any data, so I think it's just important to consider it, and I'd like to see if you guys have similar ideas, or if you should just go with what the city has proposed.
Okay, Mr. Buck.
So unfortunately, the chief's not here to answer the question, but how does our starting salary for the police department, to Phil's question, how does our starting salary compared to other cities around the area?
So we're generally on par, and one of the things that we've been looking at in salaries for all positions is what other kind of increases are other cities looking at, and it's all over the board. For instance, Shirts is determining whether they're going to do between 4% and 7%. Selma is doing a 4.5%. Of course, these are across the board, right? Because there's a fairness issue that always goes into that, and a morale issue that goes with it as well. And then probably the one that we're most concerned about is what Live Oak is proposing. So they are doing 5% across the board. They're doing an additional 5% for anybody who makes $48,000 a year or less. And then they're also giving them one additional paycheck a year. So that's very competitive. And they also have the same STEP program that we have as well. So we've looked beyond them. We've looked at other cities, what they're doing too. And I think what we're proposing is in the middle. And I think it goes a long way in treating every employee, regardless of their socioeconomic status, on a fair and even playing field, without causing rift from one department to the next or one employee to the next, in saying that why did they get this and somebody else didn't.
Yeah, because I feel like what might end up happening if we do that is that we start poaching candidates from other cities, and then other cities look at what we're doing and they raise their rates, and then people start moving over to them, and then it becomes sort of like a bidding war to see who can offer the most to the starting salaries, you know? So my vote is to continue with the 5% COLA increase, or sorry, the 5%, yeah, the 5% cost of living increase, and leave the step increases as they are.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Who else? So Mr. Ponce proposing that there be a change in the allocation for staff in terms of their compensation. I have not heard a motion yet. So.
Move to approve the budget as written.
Second.
Okay, then Shelby and Najarian. Discussion still open.
This is just a presentation, not an action.
Yeah, it's a presentation.
Oh, this is just presentation. Then we
Well,
don't
it's
vote
until
on
we get
this
to the
until
tax
afterwards.
rate. Yeah, you're not going to vote on the budget until September.
Yeah. Excuse me.
That's why I said this
My
is
bad.
just a presentation, and I believe
Tonight's
it's bringing it up for
presentation.
I think Mr. Vaughan is
And
bringing
I
it
know
up
that
for.
the next two are action items. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, then I have,
Yes. Mr. Jerry.
to his point, the same with
Discussion item.
Mr. Buck, Councilman Buck, I see no reason not to take take what has been given to us as far as 5% COLA, 2.5%.
Okay.
I agree with the city.
Again, this is my mistake there. This is not an action item tonight. This is the budget that comes up in next month. Right, September
6th.
September 6th. Okay. All right. So, any other discussion on the?
I do have one
Yes.
more question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said the additional 1.5 million to the golf course, so their revenue goes up by, I can't remember exactly what number it was that you said over the 2022 budget. has there been other calculations downstream from that?
So their expenses went up as well, so they actually are still balanced, so they still have a net of 0.
Their expenses went up as a result of finding, or of receiving the other
Yes,
$1.5 million?
Yes, because we are transferring out the capital project of $650,000 for the
Drainage repair, 8 and 9.
Correct, and then there's also the administrative transfer to the general fund, and then there's also the remaining portion of that to pay on the debt owed to the general fund.
Good, thank you.
Okay, good. The next item is tab G. This is also just a presentation, so remind me if I call for a vote.
No. It is a presentation. It's a presentation first, and then we're going to do an actual record vote.
I know that, but
Okay.
tab G is the presentation.
Yes, sir.
The no tab is the record vote.
Thank you.
Okay? All right.
And Mateo's going to take this one this
Teo,
evening.
you got it.
Speak up, Mateo.
Good evening. So, of the 2022 certified values, the certified total is 1.4 billion. Those still under ARB review, 121 million, with a total properties of 7,248. The new property values is 43.7 million, and the average tax value is 295,000. The prior year property tax rate, M&O, was 0.488861. Debt service, 0.100537, with a total rate of 0.589398. For the proposed fiscal year 2023 tax rate, M&O would be 0.561581, debt service 0.111628, and the total would be 0.673209. The total estimated property tax revenue would be 10.1 million, with the M&O 8.4 million and the INS 1.6 million. For the current period budget would be option 1 with the NNR rate of 0.673209, revenue of 23 million, expenditures of 22.7 million, and an excess of 255,000. Option 2 would be the mid with a rate of 0.686832 with a revenue of 23.2 million, expenditures of 22.7 million, and an excess of 459,000. Option 3 would be the voter approval rate of 0.700454 with a revenue of 23.4 million, expenditures of 22.7 million, and an excess of 664,000. Then we have the option rate, option 4, 0.656205 with a revenue of 22.7, expenditures of 22.7, and an excess of $4.
Mayor, maybe if I can interject here. By law, we are required to present you with certain tax rates. The first one is what we call the NNR, which is the no new revenue rate. In other words, what does the tax rate have to be in order to bring in the same amount of ad valorem taxes as we did last year, right? That's a flat revenue budget. So that is the no new revenue tax rate, and that is the one at 0.673209. The other one that we are required to show you is the voter approval rate, which is option 3, VAR. And that is the rate plus the 3.5% that we are allowed by state to go up without having a rollback election. And so that would be a rate of 0.700454, and then the revenue as he indicated. There's also something called a de minimis rate, which we did not present to you. It's basically what would your rate be if you needed to raise $500,000? We didn't present that to you because we don't think we need to go $500,000. And so as a staff, what we have chosen to do is to provide you with 2 alternatives, and that would be option 2, and that's the mid rate. And so that's the halfway point between the no new revenue rate and the voter approved rate. So take 3.5%, cut it in half, that's what your mid rate is. And we always propose that to you so you have options. The last option, which we don't normally do, option 4, which I asked Jessica to do this year, I posed the question, hey, what if we had an absolute zero-based budget, what would that tax rate be? If you remember, for those of you here last year, it was called the Goolsby rate because he likes round numbers, so we did a round rate for him, which we knew we weren't going to take anyway, but we did it. But we thought, you know what, given the tax situation that we're in this year, maybe it's advantageous to find out what it would be if we had a zero budget balance at the end. And I know it says $4 with rounding and everything, it's probably zero or close to zero. So we provided that fourth option for you this year, just for discussion and consideration.
Okay, this is the discussion portion. We'll do the action after the discussion is completed, because we have to have a record vote. So now it's open for discussion with council. Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What did we give up that allowed us to have $250,000 of extra money in the no revenue? I mean, what did we have to? I would imagine we weren't that much far over last budget, or were there capital projects that we were planning to do with that money originally?
So basically what that is from is the increase in, so basically the increase that I did for the sales tax revenue is the majority of that, to be able to have that little bit of buffer in there.
So in terms of expenditures, we didn't cut anything.
Okay, we had additional revenue that we're planning for in sales tax.
Yes.
Based on our trends, that's why I increased the sales tax revenue.
And that allows us to consider option 4 where we do a balanced budget and we save an individual who has a $100,000 house roughly $17 a year.
Not that.
Okay. And I'm not, you know, it's 656.20 and 673.21, so there's probably a penny in there I'm not calculating for. But round numbers, about $17 a year, the difference in those two tax rates. However, it is a pretty substantial jump from where we were at 0.580. For people who are under 65 and or commercial property owners and or non-homestead property owners. Everybody who paid $1,000 last year will pay $1,000 this year, no matter who's above 65 or disabled, they will pay $1,000, the same amount they paid last year. So,
Okay, and I'm not saying it's $1,000.
whatever it is.
Round number, yeah.
Let's forget the numbers. Whatever you paid last year to the city of Universal City, if you were 65, you will pay the same amount in cash, money, dollar amount.
Correct.
This year. Whereas everybody else who's under 65, commercial property owners, and non-homestead property owners will absorb this increase. We'll take this increase, excuse me. Okay. Thank you.
You know, here's the situation. Many cities have been hit by this double whammy. The property values have gone skyrocketing for all of us. We know it. You all sitting out there. I don't know how many of you didn't complain about it or file it. I imagine the vast majority of us did. That's on top of it. And the exemption that was passed by the voters is certainly a factor as well, the over 65. So we have to, we had to take that into consideration. The changes are part of something that our voters asked us for, and it's happened. They voted for it. And the other we had no control over it. Absolutely no control over the raising in our property values as dramatically as they've been. Mine went phenomenal. I mean, all of us, I'm sure, it's kind of what happened. And we have absolutely no control of that. No control of it. So this is an agonizing discussion that we've had and that staff has worked on for a long, long time, trying to figure out what is the best possible thing that they can do. And you can take a look at the revenues that would help support if we went into the no new revenue rate, which used to be called the effective tax rate, a new term. And then they did come up with that option 4, which would be basically a totally balanced budget with 0 changes. but taking that into consideration, there may be some activities or services that the city would not be able to provide. And that's not broken out yet, but that's part of our discussion. So I just want to bring that up to you so you're aware that this double whammy we've been hit with has been a tough one for us. It's been a tough one. Yes, Phil?
I have to say that the rates are wrong though, and I'm not trying this to just be a correctionist, but if you have the 2022 preliminary, I can show you how these are too high. If you, I don't know if we can pull it up on the screen, but there's a calculation on the bottom where they calculate the revenue for you. And what you're missing is you've not included the freeze tax. So the freeze tax is $2 million. We've just taken the taxable value, divided it by the rate to get the revenue that we need, but then you have to add the $2 million. So if we adopt the 0.67329, the no new revenue, that would give us like 12.1 million, but we've only asked for 10.1 in the budget. And if you have the certified totals, it has the calculation right on the bottom. They gave it to us on the table. If you want to look at it, but it's right there. It's like fourth line from the bottom. They give it to you where they say your rate, prior year rate times the value plus the freeze tax gives you 10,767. Now, I sent you the calculations earlier, but I guess we didn't have time to go through those. But the rates are not 0.67. If we want to generate the 10.1 that's in the budget, it would be 54 cents. And if we want to do like option 4 to fill the budget, it'd be 52.74 cents. If you look at that formula.
Right, and I would like them to explain that because we've been through this before. Could you guys explain what Mr. Vaughan's talking about?
Yeah, we've had a general discussion via email. So I agree with you, and I told you I agree with you, but the auditor, not the auditor, the tax appraisal district has told us over and over again that we are not calculating that correctly. They have a program that they use, which is provided by the Texas Comptroller's Office, and all of them, every appraisal district uses the same one. They ran these numbers, 3 different people before they gave them to us. We were in shock and awe, didn't believe them, said like you, they didn't add this back in. They're saying they did. It's in line 1, and then they took it out again in line 2, and then they added it all back in, and they came up with that number. I mean, I'm telling you, we have questioned them on this so much, I'm surprised they even answer the phone anymore. And so here's our question that we have to ask ourselves. Are we going to run their numbers and go with what we think that the rate should be based on ours, or are we going to go with the certified tax numbers that they gave us and know that our numbers are correct, or are we going to throw another number out and just assume that's what it should be based on our understanding? And I'm not comfortable taking the 0.54.
Well, I think there's 2 different things here. So there's the truth in taxation, which calculates the NNR. And that's complicated, and it might be at 67 cents, and I can't argue with it, because like I said, I couldn't really figure out the form either. But the levy that you're going to get from the rate you adopt is simple to calculate. So that 67 cents, if you plug it in the same formula on the certified totals, which is what I would recommend, would give you well over 10.7 million. And you can look at the calculation right there where it's using 58 cents, which is last year's rate, and it's giving you 10.7 million in revenue. So you can tell that it has to be below 58 cents if you're only asking for 10.1. If you go over 58 cents with over last year's rate, then it's going to be much more than your 10.7.
Okay, so let's direct our attention to page 8 and 9. And Kristen, if you have it, can you put up the tax calculation worksheet?
Well, that's not what I think we should be looking at. I mean,
I'm sorry, but this is what they tell us we have to do.
Well, but it's calculated the no new revenue rate. But we don't have to adopt that. We can go below that if we need to. If there's any way to bring this up, it would be great. Because I realize you don't trust me, but
It's not that I don't trust you, it's that these are the numbers that they have provided us, and this is
it's
what
calculate the
they
no new
certify.
revenue rate. So they said you can go up to
Not-
67 cents is what their calculation
The
is.
no new revenue rate is to get the same exact revenue we had last year.
In theory. But it won't give you
Not
that.
in theory.
It's right here on the calculation. I calculate this like every day in my job. This is like what I do. you take the freeze plus the tax rate times the unfrozen, and that gives you your tax levy. I mean, we can't adopt the 67 cents because it's gonna raise our property tax levy by about $2.5 million.
I'm sorry, I feel like I've been through this with the tax office so many times, and they have assured us these are our numbers.
They provided these rates to us.
We didn't calculate.
The truth in taxation. But they
No,
provided
the
you
Bear
the certified
Appraisal
totals.
District, the Bear Appraisal District sent us this tax rate calculation. They calculate our tax rate for us. They sent us this form that shows that our no new revenue tax rate is 0.673209. They also calculate what our voter approval rate is, and then our de minimis rate, which is on this spreadsheet that is certified by them.
Which is all fine and good, but if we want a revenue, then we have to use the formula to get the revenue that we want for our appraised values.
It's this form. It's done for me. It's uploaded to Truth and Taxation because they calculate it for us.
I mean, we can adopt this 0.67 and then have to change it later, but I don't know if that's what we
Well,
want
you're
to
only
do.
doing a record vote, and when you get to September 6th is when you're going to do your official vote. Remember, the record vote is to give notice to the public.
Done?
I know this is the first time you've gone through this, it's really
I
complicated.
understand the agony that you're going
Yep.
through and the shock and the awe. I mean, we've been going through it for weeks.
It's just an accounting error. It's not a shock and awe, really.
Well, I'm not sure we can discuss it. We think it's an accounting error or not an accounting error. What the staff did is they based it on the calculation sheet that was provided by the county. The county submitted all the information. I don't know if it's for us to say we deny that or we don't agree with it. And I appreciate your comments, Bill. I mean, I know that's what you do for a living. So what I ask you all to do is to take a look at, again, that no new revenue rate, the mid rate, just under the threshold rate, and then it would be an absolutely balanced budget with zero funds left over for anything. So as you make your decision after this discussion, that's what you need to look at. And I don't think there's any other numbers that we can play with right now. That's my own judgment. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, you said earlier, there's probably some people out there that don't like you. I want to let you know right now, you're good for this council, okay? You bring up a lot of interesting things. With that said though, and there's a few things I'm good at, this is not one of them, so when I go home, I'm definitely going to need a beer. But this basically just confuses me, is what it does. But thinking 101, you are saying the same thing, basically, and they're telling you this is it. And we need to go by, this is me talking, this is dumb it down 101 for me. We can go by these numbers. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We adopt this, we still have time coming up. This is not, we're not just saying, put this in stone. If between now and when we need to make our final vote to adopt these numbers, we can rattle somebody's cage over there, or somebody over there at the tax office goes, oh boy, did we screw up. We can change those numbers to what Mr. Vaughan is talking about. Am I wrong? Am I right?
You are
Am I
correct.
speaking out of my...
And we have numerous calls saying, we think you've screwed up. And they're saying, no, we haven't.
So again...
And we've even talked to different people and had them calculate the rate.
So again, between now and when we actually do our vote to adopt this, if things change, we can change that calculation and vote on that at that time. Is that correct?
I believe in terms of public trust, you can probably vote to have a lower rate, but I certainly wouldn't suggest that you vote to have a higher rate after you've done your record vote on the tax rate.
And I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about if they, all of a sudden, they look at their thing and, you know, Mr. Vaughan here, who's very knowledgeable, I don't have a problem with that. They all of a sudden say, oh, geez, we're wrong. We do agree with his numbers, and they come up, we can change this on our presentation to vote on it.
Yes, on the
Correct?
6th.
All right, because right now, you know, I'm sorry, but, you know, I've learned a lot in my 2 terms, but we start getting into these type of numbers, and I'm sorry, you know, and I don't tell me none of you are out there not like me right now going, eh. I don't understand how they get the difference in calculation myself too, but this is something we go by and can change.
Can I make it just, I'm sorry.
I do, yes.
Go ahead, Shelby.
Thank you. We get one of these every year, correct?
Yes.
Certified, who's certified?
Yes. They do a certified roll they give us that we rerun these numbers based on the certified roll, and then Jessica certifies it again.
Do we know of any time in the past years that it's been wrong?
Not that I'm aware of. But, you know.
Were we at the end of the year,
obviously
were we set
thousands
the,
of cities that.
right, I'm just thinking more like at the end, we set the tax rate, and at the end of the year, we're going, wow, we got an extra $2 million sitting in the bank. Okay, thank you.
The problem is the truth in taxation, the whole way it works, it says, here's last year's levy, what do we need to get this year's levy? But because of the freeze, we're comparing the unfrozen values this year to the total values last year. So in order to get the same revenue, that's why it's generating the 67 cents, because it's saying, well, you gotta really jack up your rate to get the same amount of revenue.
Yeah, that's the no new rate.
But,
NNR.
but that doesn't take into account what the frozen accounts are paying, and they're paying $2 million. And that's the number that's on the certified totals, where it says, takes your tax rate plus a number, because it gives you your levy right there. It tells you in words what the levy is. It says approximate levy equals freeze adjusted taxable times the tax rate plus the actual tax, which is the frozen tax. But, I mean, I don't think we're gonna settle this tonight. I think what I would propose is that we pick the number that we want the revenue to be, and then maybe we can finalize the rate based on the revenue that we agree. So if we, like the budget right now has 10,106,000 that's for revenue, which would give us the surplus of the 255. Are we all in agreement there? That's the total revenue, property tax and sales tax and everything, but the property tax revenue, which on the budget was 10,106,000.
Correct.
So I think if I would just say my opinion, I think we're probably talking between the no new revenue rate, which would be what's in the budget, which is 10,106,000, or the balanced budget revenue, which would be 10,106,000 minus the 255,000. So that's 9.85 million.
What's the 255,000?
Well, that's the surplus that's in the first scenario. So if we adopt the budget as it is and get a tax rate to get the budget, that would give us a surplus of 255. Or do we want to adopt a rate that will give us a balanced budget, I guess is the question. If we pick one of those, then we can pick a rate today, I guess, and then they'll know what to adjust it to if it needs to be adjusted. Does that make sense?
Okay, sure.
So, I mean, I just want to be clear, I'm okay with option 4. I mean, okay, so I'm going to save 30 something, I don't know what my property value rented at this year, but, so I'm going to save somewhere between $30 and $40 a year this year. Woo-hoo. I just want to make sure the city has enough money to keep the lights on, keep the fire department running, keep the police department running. That's what's important to me when we're looking at these numbers. And so, if you guys are comfortable with option 4 and having a balanced budget, I'm okay with having a balanced budget. If Bear County comes back and says we messed up on this and we need to change that number, then we can change it. That's fine. I think the other part of it too is that we're not the first city to do a 65 and older tax freeze in Bear County. So this is not their first rodeo on this either. Hey, I'll give anybody, you fat finger something in Excel and the numbers all don't work. That's fine. But if we got 3 or 4 different people over there that said they checked it, they double checked it, and let's just say they whoops and we have an extra $2 million next year, well, I'm sure we can figure out a way to lower the taxes back down and do something with the money that benefits the citizens. You know, I'm not saying that's where we want to end up. I don't want to end up there. I don't think we're going to end up there. You know, I trust BCAD to raise my property values as high as they possibly can. I trust my the company I hired to fight it down as low as they can. But I think when it comes down to it, they spent the time to certify this, and we've made multiple phone calls. I think we have to go off this for right now.
I think we're locked into it. Again, I agree with Mr. Vaughan. From the moment we've gotten this, I believe that it's been wrong. I've emailed them myself, Jessica's talked to them, to one person. We called back later, thankfully got a different person, asked her to rerun it, and she pulled the file. And they keep coming back. Now, it could be that internally they're making a mistake and they're just pulling the same stuff out of the file. But we are hounding them to try to get a better idea of whether or not this is our rate. Intuitively, it's telling me this is not our rate. That's the first discussion that we had. And then from there, we had to go back and figure out why. And like Mr. Vaughan has done, and Mr. Buck did as well, we go back to this senior tax freeze. What is it that is different on that line and the way they did their calculation that's giving us this rate? And I can't say that I feel comfortable with how they did it, but they're assuring us that's their process. And we'll continue to have discussion with them until they can absolutely, resolutely, I'm not going to ask for their firstborn child by any means, but I'll ask for something close to that. I agree. And as for the option 4, you know, as a staff, we're sensitive to what happens to property owners as well, and some of us are property owners, so we're always trying to be sensitive to that. And if we didn't think we couldn't have lived within option 4, we wouldn't have presented it to you. You know, it's not unusual for us to start a budget year and numbers start changing throughout the year, and we say, as a group, okay, revenue's not the same, we have this, sales tax is going down, what can you cut from your budget? Or usually what we do is we give a percentage and everybody has to cut equally, except maybe Randy, because he has all the money, so he usually has to do a little bit. And so, you know, we're malleable when it comes to the budget. And remember, this is an estimated budget and it's estimated revenues.
There's still more properties there. There's still more.
There are reviews still
open. That will change as well.
A lot less than there was a few weeks ago, thankfully.
Well, and I mean, you know, I know I've been saying $12. I mean, the jump from 0.58 to this, I will notice that. I will see that is you know, $300-400 extra a year on my property. Like, that is a noticeable change. You know, the difference between the option 4 and the option 1 is minimal. It's more the fact that we do have to go up. We have to maybe not do no new revenue, but to balance the budget. The percentage, percentage per $100 of property value is going up substantially. And those of us that's going to affect are going to feel it.
Yeah, that'll be the under 65 in the commercial properties. And, you know, I hate the thought that we're getting anywhere near a rate of 0.70. And I know sometime, for those that were here, the last time, I had sent out to you a list of all the cities in Texas and what their tax rates were, and it also had their population listed. And we are, you know, considered a very small city in Texas, maybe not like on Selma or Kirby population-wise. But when you look at some of the other cities that are around the Dallas and the Houston area, and you wonder why do they have 0.70? There's a lot of factors that work into that, but there are a lot of entities that do. I still want to be one of them. I don't want to have a 0.70 tax rate. So
I remember when we hit 6. I remember when we hit 6.6. That was a difficult year.
It's very difficult.
We did that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Bear County Appraisal District sent out the notices of appraised values, were they accurate?
No.
Why?
Because they didn't factor in the senior tax freeze.
So we're open to the possibility the Bear County Appraisal District missed this again.
So
we believe
right.
that somehow they have miscalculated this.
Well, we knew they did.
Okay. I want to verbalize what Bear County is telling us with the certified tax rules and that truth in taxation. In order for us, as Universal City, to generate the exact same revenue for 2022 tax revenue, for the property taxes, as we did in 2021, in order to do that, the seniors are going to pay in 2022 exactly what they paid in 2021.
Right.
All of the other properties in Universal City that are not subject to the over 65 freeze, their average values, as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, have gone up significantly. So what Bear County is telling us is that the seniors are going to pay exactly the same from one year to the next. But in order for us to generate the exact same amount of revenue on the property values that have gone up significantly, we have to raise the tax rate.
That's right. And that's why this rate is 0.67.
Okay.
That's why that proposed rate.
I just wanted to point that out. In order to generate the same amount of revenue, the seniors are going to pay the same, and the other properties where the values have gone up significantly, we have to raise the tax rate in order to generate the same amount of revenue. That's what we're saying? Good. I understand what we're saying, but I disagree with you.
It's an inverse, as Victor had said, it's an inverse. When your valuation changes, your rate's gonna go up or down based on the valuation.
Thank you. I'm for option
And
4.
again, remember when he did his numbers, he's like going, you know, you went down by 9%. I even questioned him and I said, well, how do you know we went down by 9% on your presentation? And he said, well, I got my numbers from
Bear County.
From Bear County.
We have questioned the heck out of Bear County. So I don't think we need to argue this point any longer.
I agree.
We don't necessarily agree with them, but they've told us time and time again that their figures are right. So what we need to do now, this is the discussion time. What I need to have you guys do as we move on to no tab is to come up with a proposed tax rate schedule so we can schedule these public hearings. And that's why I'll leave it open to you guys now. Someone want to make a motion on what they would suggest we do, and then we'll take it from there.
I'll make a motion that we accept option 4.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Najarian, second by Councilmember Shelby. Go to option number 4.
I'm sorry, is this the one that we have to say exactly, the exact numbers?
Oh. Yeah, I probably have to give the exact numbers.
Do we have a cheat sheet for that?
Because you have to remember, this is a record vote, so I appreciate that you said option 4, but if you could actually say the rate
Just
and
say
the
the
revenue.
rate of, which would be the rate.
We just choose $2.
This is the one.
That's the other one.
0.6.
That's option 1.
Oh, we don't have the breakdown for option.
Well, the breakdown.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because we have to read the M&O and the INS separately.
But the INS is the same rate, so you can just subtract the INS from the option 4.
You guys are defeating.
Okay, well, what would be the best way to?
Let me do the motion on it.
Take the motion, I'll second.
Calculator.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's on this page.
That's for the,
That's option 1.
that's for option.
Yeah, let me see if I can transcribe this.
Can you back up?
I move to approve. We'll do this nice and slow.
Okay.
The option 4, which is a M&O tax rate of, oh no, we can't do that because I need to subtract it.
Hang on just one second.
She's gonna
Get my calculator.
Well, I'll say calculator just to be sure. If we do adopt this and it's the wrong rate, we're not adopting. Will we be able to fix it? How would we fix it? Or
Well, we've got a couple
all
weeks
already
now.
motioned
We'll do
or
our
we can't
public
fix it?
hearings, hopefully by August 30th, we'll have a lot of this hashed out with the county.
Okay.
And then at that time, when we do our public hearing presentations, we can
There we go.
say the rate that the council chose, the rate that we really think it needs to be, and then when you get to September 6th,
544,577. Okay.
when you get to September 6th, then you'll do a vote and you'll
Great.
choose
You got it now?
correct rate.
Okay, Mr. Shelby,
Another chance to
you
vote.
got your motion?
All right. Here we go. See if I get this right. I move to approve that we accept option 4, which is an M&O rate of 0.544577, an INS rate of 0.1117, 628 for a total of .656205. Anything else I need to get in that?
The revenue on the next slide, right? We have to do the revenue.
I don't think, do we have to read the revenue?
I believe so.
You're gonna have to do that. Oh, the revenue. Revenue of $22,757,849 with an expenditure of $22,757,845.
Okay.
I second that motion.
We do have a motion, we do have a second. Any further discussion? All right, call for the vote then, please.
Councilmember Shelby,
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville,
The best we can do, aye.
Councilmember Bug,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Okay. So, option 4. I mean, everybody is really concerned about it. This has been a really tough time, and so this is what we'll go forward with. We'll publish the notices, we'll have the public hearings, and then hopefully we'll continue to work with the county. And if there's any changes, we can adjust that as the time comes up. But we've got a couple more weeks, so let's hope that maybe some numbers may change. If not, we're going to go with that option number 4, which would be the least financial burden on any of our taxpayers that we can recommend. All right. Okay, that takes care of that. Tab H. Consider Resolution 941. It's a resolution authorizing a project which will facilitate the promotion and development of new or expanded commercial development and which was approved by the Board of Directors of the Economic Development Corporation on 11 August 2022 and providing an effective date. This is the first reading. Kristen, you got it.
Mayor, thank you. Chuck Bomack, he has been involved with Randolph Plaza Shopping Center, which is 900 to 940 Padlooker Road. Approached the EDC a couple meetings back, asked for assistance with storefront improvement program to update the sign. The way that the sign currently looks is the picture on the left. He came to the EDC just asking to make a minimal improvement to the sign as it currently exists, which is basically replacing the faces and the lighting in the cabinets that are already there. The EDC said, we want to help you, but we would like to help you more if you would be interested in making more of an improvement to the sign. He came back to the EDC in the July meeting with that last design. Prices for that project that was approved ranged from $22,700 to $39,000. He did agree to take the middle bid, so the EDC did approve reimbursing him $14,400, provided that he spent $24,000 on the sign renovation. The only thing that's going to be different from the illustration that you see up there is it's actually going to be one large lighting cabinet, and it'll just have dividers between the faces of the sign. It just helps lower costs on his end. And it was approved unanimously at the July meeting. Any questions?
Any specific questions? This is a great example of that storefront improvement program where we help our businesses, but they've got to be willing to fork up the cash as well.
Right, it is a reimbursement program.
Pardon?
We had a long discussion on EDC.
Yeah.
That's Thursday.
Okay.
Move for approval.
Any motion made comments?
Second.
Councilmember Shelby, second by Councilmember Najarian. Any discussion by anyone? All right. Chris, you're there. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
Aye.
That'll be a nice improvement. Very nice improvement. Okay, we move to tab number I, which is to consider the FY 22-23 University City Economic Development Corporation budget. And I guess you're staying right there.
Yes, sir. So at the last meeting, the EDC did approve this budget unanimously. I'll just go over some of the lines for you and answer any questions that you may have. Sales tax revenue is anticipated at $1.5 million. That's an increase of $300,000. Our anticipated carryover from current budget year would be $3.8 million with a total available funds of $5.3 million. For allowances, the training and travel line did go up from $7,500 to $9,000, and that's just to account for the increase in travel expenses for us to go to our trainings. Additionally, we are going to ICSC this year, which is the International Conference of Council of Shopping Centers. Debt service, in prior years, it was only budgeted on principal lines. This year, both bonds have been budgeted to show the principal and interest for those. Communication lines, printing and advertising stayed the same. We did not use the entirety of that budget and felt no need to increase it. Memberships and subscriptions, we did increase from $12,000 to $32,000, and that is because we started a CityBot contract. That is a communication tool that we use on our website that allows residents to communicate more closely with staff. It generates work orders in the background and helps us do our job more efficiently. Also, we have a video subscription, and we had to increase our subscription to Archive Social, which is what archives all of our social media. Promotional items, that budget line went up from $7,000 to $9,500. Again, that's just to account for the increase in cost of goods. Legal and accounting administrative support, those line items stayed the same. Insurance for our officers did go up just a smidge from $850 to $1,000. Our newsletter cost increased by $1,000, and that's just to account for the additional cost of postage. As far as our real property and equipment, these are kind of the projects that EDC authorizes throughout the year. We have $895,000 budgeted for our Pat Booker Road improvement. This is a project that we've been working on for several years now, hoping to upgrade the landscaping, wayfinding, and lighting on Pat Booker Road. Pat Booker Road, our maintenance and supplies line, that is our contracts for our landscaping. They maintain the right-of-ways, and that went up from $53,000 to $65,000. And that's because the EDC has acquired 5 more properties in which the maintenance of those properties are rolled into that contract. Facade improvements, which is similar to the projects that you approved tonight, $250,000. We have some prior year projects rolling over that we've already authorized, but the funds did not come out of this budget year, those being 2405 Pat Booker Road, which is the old Acme Ace building, Exordium LLC, which is the old Stupidors building, the Pat Booker Road redesign project to add some medians on both ends of Pat Booker Road, and the CJ Charboiled sign improvement for the new restaurant opening up in the Triangle Shopping Center. We increased the business incentive line to $600,000 just because historically we've been giving about $500,000 a year, so we just increased that to reflect what we've been doing. North Lake Monument sign, we budgeted $50,000. That's a project that we are trying to lower the front end of that monument sign to make those logos that are on there more visible, and also replace the landscaping that's all died off and dead behind that sign. Holiday decorations is still $50,000. Community events stayed at $97,000. And our property acquisition went from $2 million down to $1 million because we've already acquired several of the properties we've identified, and we have about $1 million left in that bond to spend for property acquisition. We have a contingency of $392,000, bringing us a balanced budget of $5.3 million.
This is an action item, so let me take a motion and then we'll have discussion.
Move for approval.
Councilmember Shelby.
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Najarian. All right, discussion.
I just have one question. So aside from the prior year projects that have already probably been approved by council, right? Is everything else in that real property and equipment stuff that would come back to us for approval on an individual basis?
Correct. So these projects, they authorize, anytime the EDC spends more than $10,000, or actually $2,500 for them, $10,000 goes to council, they would have to approve each project individually, and then council would have to ratify.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Anybody else all right? Okay, motion and a second. Let's call for the vote, Chris.
Councilmember Shelby.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
And motion passes. We're going to go into closed session in a second now to pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551-72 to deliberate on the purchase of approximately 3.9 acres of real property generally located northwest at the intersection of Athenian and Cinnabrook in Live Oak, Guadalupe. Actually, not Guadalupe County, it is Bexar County. So that is, there's a typo on that, because it's definitely in Bear County.
Yeah, we know that. The
Okay, we're good.
authorized one already happened.
Right, we're good. Okay, so let's break into session right now at 9:48, and hopefully we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Mr. Maxwell, do you miss it, sir?
Really? Mine's not for like 20 minutes.
I get to sit out here and get a blanket.
And roll your eyes and sigh.
99% of our
Farmland.
Okay, everybody back? Oh,
It's much better doing that. We're waiting on that.
Did you guys kill Phil? Murdered him? You had enough? You just-
I don't know what happened. I don't know. What happens in executive session?
Well, yeah, we can't
discuss what happens in executive session.
Apparently.
It's like
If he doesn't come back.
Oh, you found my answer. You found my
If he doesn't
answer.
come back, you just have to assume.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wondered where that was when I was walking out here. Thank you.
Okay, we'll reconvene at 10:03, and I will be glad to entertain a motion under tab number J.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve resolution number 942, a resolution of the City of Universal City, Council of Universal City, Texas, authorizing the purchase of 3.9037 acre tract of land, being lot number 4, City Block 5047H, Bear County Appraisal District Property ID 1218168 in the City of Live Oak, Texas, and for the city manager to negotiate on behalf of the city to purchase that property.
Okay, there's a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Najarian.
Even with the knuckle, that was pretty good.
I was gonna say.
Any other discussion? All right, Kristen? Call for vote, please.
Councilmember Bus?
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Neville?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan?
Aye.
And motion passes. We'll now, that has completed our business for this evening, so I'll turn it over to our city manager for her comments.
Thank you, and I just have one item, and I asked Randy to present it because, you know, we have had some rain lately, but we haven't had a lot of rain. And I know that Edwards has gone into stage 4 water restriction, and we're in stage 2. So I thought we would take the opportunity for Randy to talk about water restrictions and what we can expect now and moving forward.
Mayor Council, as Ms. Turner said, currently just a day or two ago, it was announced that Edwards has basically went, that the Edwards Aquifer is under stage 4 now. So what that means is that for the city, we take a 40% cut in our allocation of pumpage. Currently, we are.
Mr. Neville can't hear you.
Oh, okay. So the Edwards has basically said that we're at stage 4 throughout the Edwards plateau. So everybody has to follow the stage 4 rules, which means that everyone is at a 40% cut. At stage 2, we were at 30%. Stage 3, we were at 35%. Now we're at a 40% cut of our overall allocation. So I want to let y'all know, based on, we've been after, every time we have the opportunity to go after more Edwards water, we've been doing that each year. So we're actually in good shape right now. We ran some numbers from this point forward. Currently, we have an authorization amount of 3,747 acre feet. Critical period up until the that we've been under right now, under the new authorization amount, we're at 2,687. So we can't go over that amount. If we get any pumpage that goes over that amount, we will get fined. So our actual pumpage right now, we're at 1,596 acre feet. Projected, we did a projection between now and December at a 40% cut using the numbers from last year, which is 1,015. With that, we'll be at a total of 2,613 acre feet pumpage. That will leave us about 74 acre feet if we stay on that projection of last year's numbers, which means we have adequate adequate capacity. If anything changes drastically between now and December, meaning that we're over pumping what we projected, or the Edwards, basically there's emergency stage is stage 5. Basically that means no outdoor watering at all. If we get to that point, that's when I'll be looking at the Carrizo coming on. But the Carrizo, that is our emergency water to also pump into our system to help us out where we don't over pump the Edwards. But I am limited to only 900 acre-feet per minute, as we can, 900 gallons per minute is all I'm allowed to pump into our tanks over there. So basically, but the Carrizo is also under restrictions as well. So we have to monitor that. And they take priority. If they need it, they have the priority before they can send it to us if there's a shortage on their end. And that has to do with their water tables as well. So I just want to reassure you right now, we're in good shape right now. Monthly, we'll be looking at our projections, but as of today, we are still on par to be okay for the remaining of the year, unless something more drastically happens, or we get some nice rain. That's what we need right now. There's more rain to fill up that aquifer. So,
okay. Thanks, Brenda.
That's my report.
Love the news.
Can we ask any questions right now? Okay.
But you offline
I guess our biggest concern is that the Edwards is going to be advertising that we've gone into stage 4, and they are in stage 4. As a city, we are still in stage 2.
Good.
And so, as you know, SAWS and the Edwards Aquifer Authority, they love to blast information out, whether it be radio, TV, social media, robocalls, and they're going to say, oh, now in stage 4. And it's going to create a lot of confusion because it has no application to us at this point. But we thought it would be best to just advise council of where we are and the fact that we are still in stage 2. And hopefully will remain in stage 2 for the remainder of the year. But there may be some confusion coming forward with SAWS and the Edwards.
Keep doing those rain dances. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's start with you now, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep it short because we're running out of time. For my fellow council members, I've been doing my meet and message events on the Sundays before a council meeting. I'm going to be out of town on the 4th of September, which would be the next Sunday prior to one of our city councils. Is anybody interested in taking it over for me? I would rent or reserve the library, and then all you would have to do is go pick up the library packet key on Friday or Saturday before that Sunday to host the meeting. Otherwise it would be canceled for that weekend. Is anybody interested in doing that?
I was on Sunday, I would.
Nope. You will? Yeah? Okay. Thanks, Phil. I'll make the reservations for you. I will. Yeah, and that's why I'm going to be out of town. So I will skip the history of Universal City tonight in the interest of getting everybody out of here on time. That's all I have.
It's interesting. You are. That's very interesting. Thanks for doing that. Mr. Neville.
That's good. Well, thank everybody for sticking around. That's from your bedtime.
This is a semi-world's record for audience sticking around for this late. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Short and sweet, casino night this Saturday. Be there. That's all I have.
Okay.
Nothing for me tonight. I'm good.
Just one quick thing, the 19th Air Force Change of Command is Friday morning. I'll be going to that. And the general that's retiring is not going far, he's going to Laverne. So, anyway, should be nice. One other thing I need to let you know, and Jim and I have talked about this as well, is that the Herald newspaper has made a decision that they are no longer going to be supplying Universal City with the newspaper. Okay? So if you haven't gotten your Herald, there's a reason we're no longer receiving the paper. Okay? So
we have had
It's been several weeks since I've got home. Several months.
Yeah, it's
several months for us.
and that allows it opens up a situation for us because that's one of our papers of record. So we're still going to be using the Express News, but we'll be looking around for another paper of record.
Well, we have the Express News, the only other paper that we could do is the Seguin Gazette because it's delivered in Guadalupe County, which is also the county that we're in.
Yeah.
So,
That would be the only other option.
once we hammer out the whole issue with the primetime newspapers, and from what we can tell right now and talking with some of the other cities, it's been pretty hit and miss in them. Some people get it, some people don't. A while back, Shirts stopped using the Herald because they only delivered to half of their city and not to the other half, and they couldn't explain why. So they don't advertise with the Herald at all. They do the Express News or the Seguin Gazette because they're in Waterworks County also. So we'll be looking at those options.
Just wanted to be aware that in case the rumor mill starts spreading out big time. Well, didn't you? There's your answer. All right. Thank you everyone for sticking around with us this evening. We really appreciate it. It is now 10:14 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for coming. Pray for rain.